Good evening and welcome members of Planning Committee and welcome members of public and everyone watching from home. We start the meeting with agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Councillor Preetam Garewal, Chair of Planning, he's not here today, so I'm chairing in his absence. Uh, Apologies for lateness from Amy Croft. Anyone else? Any apologies?
Councillor Lal, Chair.
Councillor Gurmel Lal. Thank you. Agenda item 2, declaration of interest. From myself, I attended agenda item 4, former Chiswick Police Station building, with my fellow committee members. And anybody else? Councillor John Trout.
Same attended a site visit for agenda item 4 and received an information pack from the developer. And for agenda item 5, I visited the site and viewed it from the road.
Thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, Chair, I received also the emails and then I visited the police station Chiswick with you.
Thank you. I think everybody done same, almost same. Thank you. Councillor Luki.
Equally, the former police station on Chiswick High Road, and also the land at Rothbury Gardens, which is in my ward, and I've visited that a number of times and met with residents and developers, or encouraged developers to meet residents, albeit the 11th out the last time, and I've communicated with the planning officer, Sophie Middleton, and received further information from her and shared information with her on historic use of the site, which wasn't available to officers previously.
Thank you. Councillor Marina Sharma.
Thank you, Chair. I also visited former police station Chiswick. I've also visited Rothbury Gardens from the roadside, and I've received emails for item 6 for residents.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ellen Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. The same things that people have had for item 4, even though I didn't attend the site visit. And I think something regarding item 6 as well, emails, but that's it.
Councillor Dan Browning.
Yeah, same as everyone said. Also, I had a couple of emails regarding agenda item 4 from residents asking for a site visit, which inevitably happened with officers and other members of the committee.
Thank you. Agenda item 3, page number 7 to 9, minutes of previous meeting held on 11th of January. All agreed? Anything to
Agreed.
be? Thank you. Now, agenda item 4, planning application for former Chiswick Police Station. So up to Jesse, please.
Thank you. One thing to note, since the publication of the addendum report, a further representation supporting the application has been received, meaning that there has been a total of 36 objections against the application and 6 letters of support. All right. The application site is located at the junction of Chiswick High Road and Linden Gardens and falls within the Chiswick High Road Conservation Area and within Chiswick Town Centre. Within the wider context, to the northeast is Turnham Green Station, the associated railway line, and Chiswick Common. The existing site is occupied by the Part 4, Part 2-story former police station, which has been vacant since 2021. The proposal that we are discussing tonight is for the demolition of the former police station and the erection of 2 buildings ranging between 1 to 6 stories, providing 50 extra care homes for the elderly with shared facilities, community space at ground floor, cycle parking, landscaping, and ancillary works. The loss of the former police station would be acceptable given that it has been vacant for over 18 months. The facility is no longer required by the Metropolitan Police, and the proposal includes the re-provision of a small community use space for use by members of the public. The residential use of the site to provide extra care housing for the elderly is supported, providing much needed extra care housing in the borough. The proposal would positively contribute to the vitality and vibrancy of the Chiswick Town Centre, regenerating this presently underutilized site. The proposal is therefore acceptable in terms of the land uses proposed. In terms of affordable housing, a financial contribution of £400,000 is going to be secured towards the provision of affordable housing in the borough, and that would be secured via the legal agreement and is considered the maximum reasonable amount of affordable housing the scheme could viably deliver. The proposed scheme would be car-free in line with the London Plan, and the existing vehicular access on Linden Gardens would be closed and reinstated to footway, with the main pedestrian access provided to the front of the site along Chiswick High Road. A financial contribution towards public realm improvements would be secured for the area to the north of the site. The closest residential neighbors to the site are located along Linden Gardens, to the west, to the east along Chiswick High Road, and to the south along Prince of Wales Terrace. Although the height of the building along Linden Gardens would be increased, the building line would be set back by Linden Gardens by about 2.4 meters compared to the existing building. I think we have a good visual coming up to demonstrate this. Just a few more. There's a comparison. Yeah, so you can see in this visualization on the left, you see the extent of the existing building, and that building line will be pushed back, as mentioned, by 2.4 meters, which is shown in the visualization on the right. In terms of daylight, 99.1% of neighboring windows would meet BRE guidance, while 99.3% of neighboring windows would meet BRE guidance for sunlight. The scheme therefore performs very well on both daylight and sunlight impacts. While although the proposed buildings would not exceed the overall height of the existing building, it would add greater height for further forward along Chiswick High Road and greater height along Linden Gardens. The tallest element at the corner of the site would be 5 stories with a setback 6-story. The height then steps down towards the site edges, which is considered an appropriate transition in heights in relation to neighboring buildings. The existing building is identified as a negative contributor within the conservation area. The proposal would therefore be supported on these grounds, introducing a new building with a high quality of detailing and a material palette to complement that of the wider conservation area. The application is therefore recommended for approval, subject to both conditions and a legal agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Any questions for officers? Councillor Dan Browning.
Hi, Jesse. So it's just a question on cycle parking and what London Plan says about that in regard to disabled cycles, adapted cycles, and as such. Looking at the plans, the cycle parking seems quite small, and obviously what it says in T5 on adapted cycles, that's for general development, but I'd imagine the residents of this development would be even more likely to need to use adapted cycles.
Yes, so we actually discussed this earlier. So in terms of the London Plan cycle parking requirements, the proposal would meet what we'd expect for this proposed use. And in terms of the larger cycles that you were just discussing, the London Plan requires at least 5% of all spaces should be capable of accommodating a larger cycle with a distance between the stands or wall of at least 1.2 meters. And at least one of the spaces provided would meet those standards. So it would be in accordance with what we'd expect under the London Plan cycle parking requirements.
Councillor Todd.
You mentioned affordable housing provision,
Yes.
and you've allocated a mere sum of, was it 400,000?
It was, yes.
Normally we expect, what, 40 or 50%? So we're dealing with 50 rooms here, or 50 units. Some are for 3 people. Can you clarify why that is so minimal, please?
Yes. So, of course, the application was supported by a financial viability statement, which was reviewed by our independent surveyor, who concluded that the maximum amount of affordable housing the application could support was equating to roughly, let me just get the exact figure up, 66,773, acknowledging the importance of affordable housing. That has been increased to 400,000. But again, that's a cash in lieu contribution. So that will go towards the provision of our own council housing schemes. And that wouldn't be on site. But as mentioned, that is the maximum the scheme could financially support based on viability critique.
I mean, in reality, we won't be able to afford one flat in the borough.
Well, so we've discussed this with our affordable housing team. The figures we have would be that it would support just over approximately comparable to delivering one unit.
Councillor.
Shall I move on? So, do you mind?
Come on,
I have
one
another
minute.
question, sorry. Do apologise, Councillor Lukey. Linden Gardens,
Mhm.
you haven't really shown that on your screen. I'm getting confusing information from the company gave us a very glossy brochure. 1 minute, the end of the Linden Garden block is down, next minute it's parallel, so I don't want to misdirect myself.
So I think you'd seen a visualization previously from
I've been on
one of
site
the
visit,
windows. Yes, exactly. So you saw a visualization from one of those windows along Linden Gardens. Now the applicant has produced a visualization on the bottom left, if you can see that.
So can I make sure I understand, if you don't mind me interrupting you?
No
Yeah.
problem.
The separate lighter colour is the roof line, is it? So am I entitled to say the roof line remains consistent to the end, or does the last one drop down?
So along the Linden Gardens elevation, the height along that extent after it steps down from the corner would be consistent. And that would be 3 stories with a setback 4th story.
Okay.
And the visualization on the bottom left that you see compares the existing building mass, and that's the bottom left here. And then they've shown the extent of the proposed building.
Okay. Well, can I make sure I'm
Of course.
not misdirecting myself? I do. Yeah, I understand that. I know where I am. Yeah. The last house next to the fire station houses, is that the same height as the building next door?
No, so you're asking the last house to the south of the application site along Linden Gardens?
The very last one.
Yes.
Next to the fire station.
Okay, so that property is 2-story property. As you can see here, we're talking about a 3-story block with a setback 4th, so it is higher. Roughly the height of the 3-story elements is about the same as the ridge height of that 2-story property, but it would be taller, but we'd consider that an appropriate transition in scale from the 3-story to 2-story.
I don't want to dwell on it. You've been very patient, but we haven't got a very good slide here, I'm afraid.
Yeah, we can go to the, I think. So that's the full extent of the Linden Gardens elevation.
So that's a new one.
This is proposed, yep.
Okay.
And you can see that house to the south, the one that isn't connected to that main block, is the existing residential property to the south, the closest neighbor to the south.
Well, you heard the objectors talking about that building line and their desire to reduce. Why was that last one next to the fire engine upgraded?
Yep, so as part of the amendments received throughout the course of the application, it previously had an increased height, so transition in height. So there was 3 different heights, or 4 even with the step downs. They've amended it to just include 1 step down, but in order to achieve a similar quantum of development, they increased the height of that final bit along Linden Gardens. So part of that elevation has been decreased in height following amendments, and then the very last element has been increased, if that's clear.
Thank you. Councillor Stroud.
Yeah, a quick question about Prince of Wales Terrace. I understand there's no access but some of the objectors are saying that there will be access, and one of the schematics appears to show access. Can we be certain that there will be no either pedestrian or vehicular access to the development from Prince of Wales Terrace?
Yes. So throughout the course of the design evolution, a previous iteration at pre-app and at submission included pedestrian access. The proposal in front of you tonight does not include either vehicular or pedestrian access from Prince of Wales Terrace.
So what we can see there are purely windows, or
They are. The main access would be afforded on the other elevation from the central courtyard space.
that's what I gathered. It seems to
Yes.
come from the courtyard. So the only way to those properties at the rear is entirely through the development, not from. Okay, perfect.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, to make a success of this, we need staff to be able to access their place of work, and we're very keen on having the very best staff in anything of this description. Having read the report, I was a little worried that you talk about a maximum of 10 to 12 staff at any time being on site. I would imagine it would be quite close to that most of the time, and quite a few of those will be coming, I'd imagine, by car. But I'm struggling to see they won't have access to the CPZ. The old marketplace pay and display, there's going to be no special arrangement there. I'm just concerned they might be penalised if they come in by car, and I wouldn't wish to see that because it's such a vital role. Thank you.
Yep. So the proposal, as mentioned, is car free. So all staff would be encouraged to travel to site via sustainable modes of transportation. It is a very well connected site within Chiswick Town Centre. So that would be what would be encouraged, and we'd be securing a travel plan statement to secure that.
But if they came by vehicle, would they be accommodated somehow?
There's no parking on site, so they would have to find parking in the area. But again, we'd be encouraging them to travel to site via sustainable modes of transportation.
Councillor Butt.
Anything else to add?
Thank you, Chair. What are the specific accommodation and services planned for the new care homes?
So what specific care level was that? Yes. So there would be on-site care to varying levels depending on the needs of the residents. And we have secured, as part of the Section 106, or will be securing, let me just bring it up, a care management strategy. Just find the exact wording. So through the Section 106, we'd secure the use, the occupancy, and the provision of care on site. So one of the heads of terms of that legal agreement would detail exactly what level of care the residents would be afforded on site. And I think perhaps the applicant would be able to detail a bit more in detail the level of care.
Thank you.
Councillor Bowring.
Yeah, so just two questions. One on that community space. So I understand that's going to be made available to community groups for free. Is that right?
It'll be secured. I believe there, again, we'd secure the details of its management and how the public would book it through the legal agreements. I believe there'd be a deposit payment to secure the space, and then they would be able to access it for either for free or a very reduced fee.
And in the future, would the operator or indeed a future purchaser of the site be able to rescind that?
No, so that would be secured in the Section 106 legal agreement. So any changes to that would require a deed of variation to that legal agreement. So that would be secured in perpetuity.
Fantastic. And then there's the first property on Linden Gardens that borders the site. On the site visit, we went to the garden, and there were some concerns around overlooking. The 2 points were the sort of the walkway further back, and then the flat roof with access onto it. We discussed sort of various things, including opaque glass, a lockable window, and boundary treatments on the boardwalk. Have those been included, or will we need to secure those by condition?
No, so there's a landscaping condition which would secure all details of the relevant boundary treatments, and we'd review that when it came time to that submission of that application. However, if members believe it necessary, we could amend that condition to explicitly reference the opaque window and the opaque glass to the end of those walkways if that was deemed necessary.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Sharma.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to declare that I work in social care for a domiciliary care provider. With regards to the no parking for carers or for the managers or the nurses that are attending, what happens if, say, for example, with the provider that this project will have, a carer goes down, a carer goes short, and you're needing a carer to come quite quickly from another part of the area, and it's going to take a long time. And I know that with the Chiswick Livable Neighbourhood, we put conditions in for carers permits. Is that not something that we could put for this?
Carer permits possible.
So I'm just checking to see is carers permits, if that's something that we do offer, but if it is, that's something that they could apply for, like any other person who fulfills that role. But I'll just check and come back to you.
Thank you. So now we have objectors. Sorry, Councillor Duki, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, a few questions. A number of us sat here at a planning presentation from the developer a few months back, and I'd like to know what's changed since then. The height of the height on Linden, the height of the return on Linden Gardens has been has grown. The agreement to give the council contribute to affordable housing within that site on site. There was talk of at least 2, but if we're talking about 400,000 as a commuted payment, you know, where did that come from, and who you know, with who did officers agree that? How did that come about? Because up until now, there was quite a lot of support. There was a fair bit of support for that. So there is that. You mentioned there can't be a change. It'd have to be a deed of variation to change. To change aspects of any Section 106 when responding to Councillor Bowring. But if somebody applies for a deed of variation, it can be granted. It wouldn't be for in perpetuity, or would it? That's the thing. We have a number of Section 106s. If everybody goes round because they don't like they don't like dog-free areas or similar, or gated, or gates that allow public in, people would be able to do that willy-nilly. That is part of it. I mean, that is one. That's 3 questions. I'll give you 3 questions here. Maybe we'll ask the developers otherwise, because I'm quite concerned about the quality. Referring to high quality detailing. Modern buildings don't really have high quality detailing, do they? It ends up being a kind of. I've lost the word for that. But anyway, how does it respond to the Chiswick High Road conservation area? Some people do like brutal buildings. Let me say, not just the police station is a good example. That's for you there, Jess.
Okay, so there's a few things to unpack there, so please do let me know if I've missed anything.
Yeah.
You mentioned about the deed of variation and an applicant being able to apply. Yes, they could laterally apply to vary the Section 106 agreements, and we would have to consider that as and when based on its merits. However, in terms of any approval that would be given, that would be tonight would be given based on the heads of terms proposed to committee. So if there was a change or full removal, we wouldn't have delegated authority to completely remove that if you granted it subject to these specific heads of terms. So it would need to come back to committee. We wouldn't have delegated authority to negotiate something that wouldn't be in accordance with the heads of terms agreed, and unless anyone wants to correct me.
5 years then before they could apply.
Okay. Yeah, so
Can we hear the advice?
You can. I was just telling the officer so she could tell you. The first time they can apply to vary is 5 years from the date of the 106 agreement. So it couldn't happen straight away. I think the other question you asked was, could it be temporary or permanent? Generally speaking, if you make a change as permanent, you don't usually. It's possible. I've seen them on a few rare occasions where we do a temporary change, but that's very, very unusual.
So in perpetuity was not correct then?
So
sorry, Jess.
the
But
word,
if that was correct, but if you made a change, you would link it back in perpetuity. That's what I was saying. It is possible they might create a valid case for a short-term temporary change. It's very rare.
Thank you both.
all right. In terms of the financial contribution, as the officer report outlined throughout the course of assessment, the applicant did propose or consider discount market rent on site with a 20% market discount. We reviewed that in consultation with our affordable housing colleagues and adult social care colleagues as well. It was concluded that because of the costs and the nature of that discount, it wouldn't be affordable to anyone on housing register, and they alternatively proposed the 400,000 commuted sum, which we considered would be able to deliver more appropriate affordable housing given the circumstances of this quite unique but use as an extra care facility.
Sorry, Chair, just on that, Jess, at the last presentation we had, something like four units being offered. Yeah, how
Yeah, so
do
again,
we
they
commute that?
yeah, they did consider that, and we looked at the discount being proposed, which was 20% at the time, and then we compared that against the cash in lieu contribution that they are proposing, and because of the associated costs for future residents, it was decided that this would be the best way of delivering genuinely affordable housing. Right, so I'll move on in terms of the changes proposed since you last saw the scheme at the planning presentation. So if we look at the elevation that's on the screen right now, so that's the Linden Gardens elevation. So I explained this earlier when Councillor Todd was asking, but perhaps not as clear as I could have been. There had been a section after the tall elements that was higher, 1 story higher, that ran part of that elevation. And then at the very end, it stepped down lower. So there's been part of this elevation that has been reduced by 1 story. And then the very end element has been increased in height by 1 story to accommodate the same density on the site, the same quantum, 50 extra care units. And then the top roof, if you look at the very corner, the mansard roof element has been set further back from the high road to reduce its visual prominence along the high road elevation. And then there's been some changes to the elevational treatment, introduced brick banding, some greater detailing at the windows and so forth. So some of the elevational treatment has also been changed since you would have last seen that. And perhaps. And so that's the Chiswick High Road elevation. And the last question was regarding the conservation area, is that correct?
Yeah, the word I was looking for was pastiche.
Okay, so we've of course seen quite a few iterations of this scheme. The material palette has been quite carefully chosen to reference the surrounding conservation area with the predominant brick use, as well as the stone detailing as well. The quality of the elevations has changed as well. You see the introducing of greater horizontal banding along that front elevation, as well as Linden Gardens. And then we have a bit more quality of the actual detailing around the windows. So all of that has been done in order to try to reference the richness of the conservation area, as well as to make sure it would appear contextual. So all of that has been done to reference the wider conservation area.
Can you indulge me with one more question, please, Chair?
Come on, Tony.
Looking at the bottom picture there, you've got the former florist next door, and there's a shadow on their windows there. When we did the site visit, there were shadows on there. There was agreement there'd be shadows on their rear elevation there, the house, the property next door, the living accommodation next door. Why is that, and how is that going to be ameliorated for the residents in that in the upper parts of that property?
Yep. So in terms of the shop front, there wouldn't be standards in terms of impacts for daylight or sunlight to shops, but in terms of yes. So again, there wouldn't be standards to be met for commercial windows, but in terms of the residential windows, we have considered that. So that would be the residents above those shops, and that's, I think, 203 Chiswick High Road is the one neighboring the site to the east, which you're talking about. The applicant has submitted an addendum note explicitly addressing the neighboring windows to the rear, and one of the windows to the rear would fall just short of BRE guidance. But as I mentioned, 99.1% of all neighboring windows would pass. So in the round, the scheme performs incredibly well on daylight and sunlight.
Thank you, Jesse.
Yes, I think Kieran can now just clarify the one question.
Yeah, so we do offer carers parking permits, but they're kind of geared towards somebody living at home who needs a regular carer. They're not geared towards staff shortages. But I'd expect the developer would have looked into it and is fairly confident they can attract the number of staff that they need. Otherwise, they wouldn't probably be proposing this. And yeah, if they're having difficulty, then they might need to increase the wages they're offering.
Thank you, Nitin. Any more question? Thank you. So we have objectors for this application. So from Linden Gardens Residents Association, Vice Chair Gareth Huxley and Ken Mentel, who want to speak. So 5 minutes for them. And Councillor Joanna Bidoff, we'll start with you first.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think the objectors have seen the addendum report. Would it be possible to show them that? As they have. Yeah, they have. It's all right. They have seen it.
Thank you, Councillor. You have 5 minutes to address.
Thank you. I'm often accused of giving my own views. I do not. I represent residents' and businesses' views as expressed by them to me. They have three principal concerns: respect for the Chiswick High Road Conservation Area, which some people have mentioned, the impact on residents of Linden Gardens and Prince of Wales Terrace, again, you've mentioned that, and parking, and the impact on residents and Chiswick's retail and hospitality economy, which you haven't mentioned. First, respect for the conservation area. Many residents are extremely disappointed by the design of this building, saying it misses a once-in-a-lifetime chance on this prime and central site to leave a legacy that Chiswick residents will be proud of for generations. They have suffered the current hideous building and hoped for something far more reflective of the best of local architecture. In particular, the former fire station a few doors along. I've got some pictures here, but they're not very good. The George IV Park, the shops next door in Linden Gardens, which have attractive windows, and the former police station opposite, which is extremely handsome and nothing like the building at all. They all have attractive frontages with handsome or curved windows and feature details. Improving the shape and design of the building and the windows at Birch Grove will not add to its cost or the time it will take to build, yet it would win respect from locals. The Linden Gardens Residents Association has more to say on this, and I support their comments and suggestions. Second, the impact on residents of Linden Gardens and Prince of Wales Terrace. The residents of Linden Gardens have urged me to support them, and I do. Again, they have more to say on that. Third, parking. Residents, as has been said, will not be eligible for CPZ permits. However, if they are blue badge holders, they can park anywhere. Birchgrove tells us its staff will not drive and that its 2 allocated spaces will be enough. Based on local experience, that is not realistic, even if it matches the council's car-free vision. Older people often drive even short distances within Chiswick. They just can't walk. Friends and family visitors from beyond are likely to drive, bringing shopping or the family pet. There is local evidence to support this. Home Cross House, a block of 109 retirement flats on Fisher's Lane, has private parking. And around 100 visitors a day, including friends of a similar age who cannot walk, cycle, or travel by bus. Families come by car bringing heavy shopping. I have seen this happening. Visitors often have to find spaces elsewhere. Meanwhile, there are controversial proposals supported by Birchgrove to reduce parking in the car park from 50 unrestricted spaces to 19, less than half. If these spaces are taken up by visitors to Birchgrove who don't spend locally or don't spend much locally, the car park will have a hugely reduced economic value to the town, whilst having a huge value to Birchgrove. Yet Birchgrove knew it was buying land next to a car park. A survey I conducted on a quiet Saturday afternoon showed that the average spend while parked at the car park was £268 per car. Most drivers were from other London boroughs and beyond: Ashford, Buckinghamshire, Camberley, Dorking, Epsom, Henley. 2 Fridays ago, I surveyed the car park's value to Chiswick's nighttime economy. The car park was full throughout when I left. 39 cars remained parked while their occupants spent money in Chiswick. Total spend during the 2-hour survey was £2,566. Most drivers came from beyond Chiswick. I know Chiswick's traders are extremely worried about this further loss of parking. They cannot afford also to lose parking spaces for Birchgrove's benefit. Residents are worried about increased parking pressure on their roads. Comments from Birchgrove saying this will not happen cannot be substantiated. They are speculative. Interestingly, every other Birchgrove development includes parking. A friend of mine is a Sidcup councillor where there is a Birchgrove development in his ward. He dropped in this morning and saw the car park 75% to 80% full. Another friend lives in Hook Heath where there's a development. When his mother visited a resident last week, the car park was pretty full. Hook Heath was my family's home for 30 years. I still visit friends there. I know when and why people drive. That car park will
Councillor,
be used.
1 minute remaining.
There is a chance for Birchgrove to be pioneering and community-minded by building a car park underground to support the local economy, not damage it by reducing parking. I urge you to consider Chiswick's future as a retail and hospitality destination, which it has been since Roman times, and defer this decision for a short time only to resolve this crucial issue.
Thank you, Councillor. Any question for Councillor Bedoff? Councillor Stroud.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor. You say you're representing residents. The truth is you're not. You're riding your normal hobby horse about parking in Chiswick and using this as another vehicle to do it with, aren't you? That's the reality. You make a scant mention of what the residents want and then treat us to your usual Chiswick's going to die if parking disappears. And we all know that that is simply not the case. So it would have been better had you addressed us about this site and not your particular hobby horse about parking with respect.
Chair, my hobby horse is the hobby horse of the shops, bars, pubs, restaurants, cafes.
Which is not this development, Madam.
Councillor. So not go into that.
Who are worried about the further loss of car park. Birchgrove is supporting a reduction in parking on this site from 50 unrestricted spaces
Councillor,
to 19.
Sorry, any planning objection? Because parking.
Yes, parking has to be part of this scheme. I know it's a car-free scheme. It's not realistic. You can't rely on people using cargo bikes and whatever else in their 80s. It's just not going to happen. You don't understand the demographic of the people living here.
Thank you,
parking
Councillor.
is considered, otherwise points wouldn't have been raised by councillors around the table who've been talking about parking. You can't allow them to ask about parking, but not allow me to speak about it. It is a concern. It's not a hobby horse. I represent all our independents and chains through the Chiswick Shops Task Force, and I know that upsets John Stroud.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you very much. Can I have Vice Chair of, sorry, Councillor Looking.
Thank you, Councillor. When in your presentation you did mention building an underground car park, say that could not be, whether it's deferred or not, say that could not be achieved. And you know, parking in Chiswick, how would you suggest the improvement of parking in front of that that space between Linden Gardens and Devonshire Road? How could that be rearranged or changed in terms of hours used or to encourage? Because I do remember when the police station was operating, some of cars were used by police officers and other people visiting the station, so they weren't always always unoccupied.
That's not the case, actually. There were two spaces allocated to the police in the car park itself, directly in front of the old police station. And they had parking at the back through the central entrance where you won't be able to access by car anymore. So there was significant car parking where there will now be development and gardens for the residents of Birch Grove. And of course, they should have gardens. My point, though, to come back to your question is, let's not reduce the number of spaces. There are currently 50 unrestricted spaces. So there are 50 spaces that you and I can park in. There are disabled spaces separately, and there are loading bays. Let's not reduce them. Then there would be some flexibility. But at the moment, when I did my surveys, all 50 spaces were full. That's the point of people spending money locally. And if we lose that economy, 4 shops have closed in the last couple of weeks because of the current crisis. We can't accelerate that by reducing the number of unrestricted spaces from 50 to 19. Those are the proposals that are not part of this scheme, but are being supported by Birch Grove.
Councillor Bowring, sorry.
So can I just get a clarification, perhaps, from Jesse? Councillor Bill's talking about the car park. Is that part of the application before us today?
No, it's not. So I believe the Councillor Bidoff's talking about is the potential redesign of the car park area associated with the market, which is completely separate to this application, has nothing to do with it. So that's not what we're here to discuss tonight. As part of this proposal, there would be no change to the car parking arrangement to that area to the north of the site.
But there would be an increase in number of people needing the spaces. That's the point. Including carers needed urgently.
According to the trip generation figures that they provided, there will be a decrease in the number of vehicles and people accessing the site compared to its former use as a police station.
I understand that, but that's speculation. And based
Councillor,
on
like we have experts who are on traffic sitting with us, giving the updates. So they've done the research because they are employed for that. Thank you very much.
that was repeating what's in the paper, Councillor. I'm really sorry, but that is, the trip generation is in the papers. It's not new research, it's in the papers.
But Councillor, they are a traffic expert. They are, okay, thank you very much if you feel like that. Thank you. Can we have Mr. Gareth Huxley, please? And
I'll stand up if you don't mind. Garth Huxley, Linden Gardens resident.
can just 1 second. So, Gareth, you're 2 speakers or 1 speaker?
2 speakers
So,
and the third one.
so you have 5 minutes in total.
Yeah.
And so I'll keep a timing. So you will take 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 3, 2, how are you going to
Well,
divide your
we'll
minutes?
split it 2 minutes each and 1 minute at the end.
4 minutes, 1.
4, okay. Okay.
The lady there is part 4 minutes.
Okay, thank you. You can start now.
Right. Garth Huxley, Linden Gardens resident. I support the idea of extra care community for the elderly, but as a retired architect with long experience, I ask myself, is this building good enough? No, it isn't. More needs to be done to the design. And here are just 2 examples. Point 1, light. Look at this board. Whatever the analysis says, it will appear too high for those living opposite, and it will add at least a third again to the height of the current building. That's a big change. The step down at the south end of the block was shown in earlier versions and was really important, but now it's been filled in, reducing light, which will be deeply resented by residents. And this is a really big drop, but with the step down reinstated, you get a much better relationship. Design guidance is clear. A design-led approach should be driven by context, but that is not the case here, where 1 more unit has been shoehorned into this part of Linden Gardens. We are the losers here. I have suggested solutions, but it feels like Birchgrove ran out of time. Point 2, the overall design. Yes, the design's better, but it is still too awkward and banal for Chiswick's conservation area. Why? Because of many poor decisions, some imposed on the architects. Here's one key example. Look at the front entrance as shown here at A. It is obviously in the wrong place, skewing the whole elevation, and for the unfortunate elderly residents, it creates a confusing route to the lifts. Why isn't it in the middle? At B, where the design is more balanced and easy to read, and the elderly can find their way around. To sum up, this design work has been rushed and compromised, and it shows. Let's have a short deferral for modest changes, because Chiswick deserves a better building.
Erica Uffendale, Linden Gardens resident, living in one of the 36 properties directly opposite the building. Profession, designer. As residents, we will have to live with this building 24/7, unlike those passing by on the high road. We support a development for the elderly, but we have to object to this design. Given its prominent position, this needs to be a landmark building. It must be sympathetic to the character of Chiswick. As it stands, it's banal, too dominant, and too corporate. Compare and contrast Linden Gardens, this new building. I want to reiterate 3 critical aspects impacting us. Point 1, the height and resulting loss of light. This is the impact of the new building on my outlook. Let's be clear, it is a third higher than the police station. At the beginning, I was told the height of the building would be the same as my roofline. It is not. Why have we been misled? The developers say they have stepped the building back to gain more space and light. It may meet the regulations, but this is our reality. Does it look like it creates more space and light? No. Our loss of light is dramatic, and many residents live in basement flats. Where will they go to get any light? Point 2, we must reinstate the step-down design on Linden Gardens that was taken out. It will dramatically improve the quality of light and life for residents. It means relocating just 1 unit. 1 unit. Garth's proposal must be seriously considered. Point 3, design and character. Design features should enhance a building and give it character. Jesse, you mentioned high quality detailing, I believe. These panels have been added to the Linden Garden side. Sorry, but this looks like my radiator at home. Why should we look out on a bunch of radiators? Please change it. We want to look out on something that feels like a residential street, not an office block. Why has it ended up being so out of kilter with the character of Linden
60 seconds left.
Birchgrove says it wants to be a good neighbour to Linden Gardens. A compromise must be found. We need a short deferral. If you approve this building, it will be a poor legacy to Chiswick. Instead, let's create a building everyone can be proud of.
Thank you.
My name is Ken Mantle. I'm a resident of Linden Gardens. My name's Ken Mantle. I'm a resident of Linden Gardens. I apologise, Chair and committee members. Obviously, I'm in no fit state to stand up. I'm representing Jim Lovell, a friend and neighbour for more than 40 years, who privately commissioned surveyors to undertake 2 appraisals of the applicant's revised daylight and sunlight assessment by XCO2 surveyors in November 2023 and their additional reassessment last week. This followed Right of Light Consulting Limited raising their comments to LBH on behalf of Mr. Lovell, owner of 203 Chiswick High Road, which you've seen diagrams of in their formal response to LBH, requesting data that fulfills all BRE tests. Contrary to that, which the applicant may attempt to put forward at this meeting, the November 2023 and particularly the February 2024 reassessment by XCO2 clearly use negligible and marginal in their findings. Our surveyors were presented with the additional data at the last moment. We challenge that these wordings are subjective, not objective, in respect of the actual situation with a detrimental effect on Mr. Lovell. The daylight distribution test has not been undertaken. The BRE guide says both vertical sky components and daylight distribution need to be considered. We therefore question the validity of the data or weight given to it simply in order to justify the data submitted by the applicant. We cannot treat people negligibly or marginally. They're real. Mr. Lovell has resided here all his 73 years. It's the only property that directly abuts the proposed development, as you've again seen there. Habitable rooms to the front and rear of his property, as you've also seen, comprise a living room, kitchen and 2 bedrooms. Right of Light Consulting's letter highlighted that XCO2's assessment do not include all the necessary BRE tests for daylight and sunlight, nor consider fully the habitable rooms to the rear of the property. The applicant's findings continue to be incomplete. Before the former police station with current fire escape, the neighbouring shops were in line both at the rear elevation and as set back from the 1st and 2nd floors along the frontage and the then contiguous roofline. All of those boundaries have been exceeded in the current applicant's plans, depriving Mr. Lovell of his light. This study and many others Birch Grove agenda responses indicate underestimations and overpromising of resolutions, a point that has also been offered by other objectors. In their summaries, Right of Light Consulting requests that the committee members, yourselves, make no decision in favour of the applicant until their points are fully reconciled in order that Mr. Lovell's rights are not impacted. I'd be pleased to respond to questions from members of the committee, especially those who are unable to take part in the site visit, whilst thanking their colleagues who came to view several perspectives of the site.
Thank you, Mr. Fleming. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Questions? Councillor Luki.
Forgot your name. We were in your house last week. Yeah, Erica. There's a suggestion. You mentioned, Mr. Huxley suggested relocation of one of the units right at the end there by the fire station flats. Where could it go, and what difference and how much of a difference would that make? Would we end up with 49 units, or would we still end up with 50? That's the one I was talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Garth, do you want to answer that? Because it's
Sorry,
somewhere in it's. So where would you put this one extra? Where
Well,
would we put this one extra?
Needless to say, I haven't been party to any of the conversations that the developers architects has had with the council. I would imagine there are at least 2 to explore further. One is on the Prince of Wales Terrace block, which is, in my view, a very peculiar shape at the moment. And the other one would be on the front building at the middle. I appreciate the issue of views and so on, but I believe work could be done to ameliorate that. So there are options, I think, but again, as I say, I wasn't party to the committee, the conversations.
Just one more on the there was concerns about the height. Would you think that building something higher facing Chiswick High Road, facing a two-story Marks and Spencers, or would that be better than?
Well, I think the judgment about height, or the judgment about the design of the building, should be on its own merits, the quality of the building itself. And I appreciate there are sensitivities about height, but that's for discussion in my view. So I think that the quality of the building is the key issue here, and that it shouldn't be compromised by, you know, maybe one view of the building, maybe two, but so it should be dealt with on its own merits by and large. I appreciate it's a conservation area, but conservation areas full of buildings, this is conservation areas full of buildings which are in the main quite different from each other. There isn't a pattern. So I think the building should be considered on its own merits.
Councillor Todd.
Yeah, thank you. I suppose I would declare an interest. I was a school governor with Mr. Huxley for 10, 15 years. I know him as a capable architect, and I know he's made suggestions to the design of the building which were accepted. But I want to put you on the spot, really. You've raised three things. I'm attracted to the defer option, but I just wanted to develop the credibility of that. So the entrance seems simple, but very important, given the old age, and
yes,
it's totally alien to common sense, if I'm allowed to say that, as a non-architect. The Linden Gardens, in my view, is capable of resolution. It's when we come to your third point, quality. You know, you can't ask an applicant to go away and start again.
No, I think that the...
What's your answer to that heading?
The suggestions that can be made at this stage would be to resolve a number of issues with the building, which are relatively small in themselves, but add up to a significantly improved building at the end, I believe. There are inconsistencies in detail. There are, bear with me, we can reduce. There are ways of reducing the perceived height of the building, which I believe haven't been explored, so things like parapet heights and changing the brick banding pattern and the roof profile may well achieve benefits, relatively small, but they will improve the quality of the building, in my view, and its impact on the street. It also, in my estimation, it needs more joy. It needs things in the elevation which give it particular character, and I'm talking things like color tiling or stone banding or whatever, just to make it, just to give it a character, which again would fit in very well with the high road, but it needs to be distinguished from, as has been mentioned before, what might look like an office block or a commercial building.
Thank you. Any more question? Councillor Stott.
Yep. Thank you very much. Obviously, it's one of the things we always look at quite carefully on new developments, particularly those of a large development, is that the impact of light, which you have mentioned, both of you mentioned the impact of loss of light. As a committee, we look at a lot of proposals, and this one, 99.1% daylight, 99.3% sunlight. I don't think I've seen figures this high. Now, if you're disputing these figures, that's a different matter. If you're accepting them, I think you'd have to accept that whatever's built there, the impact on your light will either be worse or at least the same as this.
Yes, I think the issue for residents is the degree of change, and the existing building, whilst not being attractive in itself, imposes very little reduction in daylight. But I think that the concern generally felt is that no matter what the assessments indicate, the perception is that there will be a severe degree of change and a loss of light and daylight, and effectively amenity as well. So, and this applies to those residences that sit directly opposite the building, because of course those are the ones who will be affected. So the issue that I would take here is more can be done to ameliorate the impact of the building on the residents opposite, which may or may not improve their daylight and so on by anything measurable. But the impression to people will be that the building will fit in a lot better with the street and have less of an impact on them.
But with respect, sir, that's two issues you're conflating. If you accept the daylight measurement figures, we're close to 100% of what the daylight and sunlight that the residents currently enjoy. Whether they perceive it to be worse or not is rather a subjective opinion as opposed to the objective test that was done.
Indeed, I wouldn't argue with that. But I think I'm effectively reporting the general mood of the people who live in the street, and I think that it's an important consideration, and I think that the design could take more steps to address those concerns, whilst not necessarily improving the daylight situation, because it obviously meets the standard. The standard, as I understand it, means that if it's more than 80% of what they currently enjoy, then it's satisfactory.
Well, that is the point I made earlier, that we look at
accept
many
that.
and
I accept that.
we see very few offering this level of compliance.
Can I just add to that a lot of the residents do live in that piece, do live in basement flats as well, like the one I showed you. So I think it's really important to just be aware of that as well. And when one of the Birchgrove representatives came into my property and saw it, his comment was, I know it meets the regulations, but clearly you're going to be severely affected. So yes, there are regulations. They have the assessments, you have the assessments, but I'm living with the reality of it, and that's very different. So, you can sit there and tell me about your assessments, but I know how dark it's going to be. I've just shown you the photo. If it's solid above me, I'm not going to see the sky. I don't have the light that I had. That's the reality.
Well, we did visit your flat, madam, so we are aware.
Exactly.
Of what you currently enjoy and what you may enjoy in the future. Okay, thank you.
Can I take up a point made by one of the councillors over there, please? When he looked and showed you the shadowing against 203 Chiswick High Road, which, as I explained, is the only actual property that abuts or will abut directly onto this development. And the fact of the matter is that whilst I may not disagree with the figures that Jesse expressed and that you've been putting forward in general for the entire area, when you look at that overshadowing and when you look at the actual report for that particular property, they are well down and actually below the 80% mark. So overall, yes, I would agree with the 99 point whatever figure. Isn't that typical? I'm not even on television.
Thank you.
So therefore, yes, as overall, you're quite correct, Councillor. The entire site, it works out, but in individual cases, such as 203 Chiswick High Road, it doesn't, and therefore what we're looking for on behalf of the resident of that particular property is a design change to ensure that that figure goes above 80%, which it isn't currently.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your help. Sorry. Councillor Croft.
Thank you. Sorry, my question is possibly to one or the other of you, or possibly both. In relation to the design change that would be needed to put that back in the realm of acceptable sunlight, how substantial would that need to be, either in your opinion or your opinion or joint opinion?
Hand over to the
yeah, thank you.
I can't be absolutely certain about this, because I think a lot will depend on design development. But I think that the skyline is very important in terms of perceived daylight and sunlight. And whilst the setback at the top of the roof achieves a lot of that, I'd like to see more analysis of what could be done to the shape of it or the height of it to reduce impact. There's a parapet running along Linden Gardens elevation, which is actually higher by half a metre than the earlier application, which showed a bigger block and then it's stepping down. So that parapet wall is higher than was previously shown. I've no reason to know why that would be. I've no idea. It would be an easy step to take to reduce that. Now, that may not affect the overall daylight level per se across the street, but it would reduce the impact in perception, and it would just improve the relationship between the new building and the existing ones. Needless to say, we'd like the step down, as we call it at the end, to be reinstated. But again, that's subject to more work. And this is the point, really. It just a little bit more work can tune this up to being a much more acceptable building, both to the residents and the high road. And I think that's what we're asking. That's why we're asking for a deferment, just a bit more time to get this right.
And if I may, in addition, currently there is of course a fire escape between the existing fire station and 203 Chiswick High Road, and therefore the light situation there is completely different to what it will be, and therefore some effort at reinstating that access to light is required.
Am I able to ask for clarification in terms of the lighting standard, whether that applies to a development across the whole development or?
We can ask on when we are discussing.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for your help. Now, applicant, we have Councillor Ranjit Gill in support of the application. So I will ask Mr. Gill to come in, please. Thank you, Mr. Gill.
Thank you, Chair. What I'm going to say, it's my own personal opinion, and also I've had some emails from residents in support of this, and also from Chiswick W4 Forum, where lots of them are supporting this. So the current building is an eyesore. It's a concrete building, and I think what has been proposed is, in my view, it's a good building. It blends in well. And as Jesse had said, it brings vibrancy, vitality, and regeneration to the area, which is what we need. And it provides care for our elderly, which is a plus point, which is what is needed in the area. Plus, the developers are giving us a community space, which is another good thing. But my main interest is my portfolio within the group, the Conservative group, is policing and crime. And I introduced the police from the Chiswick police meeting, which we had back in last year, sometime in October. And they were looking for a place to have a safe place for the police to be in the area, so that they do not have to waste so much time going from Acton and back, wasting all that time, which valuable time could be used policing in the area. And I had already had communications with the developers in the past and discussed about getting a space. So I introduced the police, and thankfully they have agreed with the police and the developers that the developers will provide access to two rooms for the police, so it will save them. They can change, they'll store all their facilities there, they'll charge their batteries and whatsoever. I mean, all three councillors of Chiswick Gunnersbury have in the past been looking for a place for the police. Councillor Ron Mashisho is here. In the past, he looked at the prospect of housing the police in the fire brigade station, but unfortunately that didn't work out. Councillor Bidoff and I have been discussing about having a place in Sainsbury's and in the town hall, but that didn't work out as well. So with this new development and the space for the police, I think it will provide what is really required in Chiswick is the police presence to give the community safety, security, and for the residents to feel secure. So there is presence of police 24/7 in the area. And I think that is the big deterrent for any crime that might take place. And it will also save the police the time from getting from Acton to Chiswick, whereas if they're in Chiswick, they can go to the neighboring areas more quickly. And I think access is what is required when there is crime. And this is a plus point. So this is my view as to why I agree that with Jesse that this is a good proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Councillor Boring.
Thanks for that. So just a quick question. I think I had wrongly assumed that the police were going to be using the community space. You You referred to 2 rooms.
Yes,
do you
2
know-
rooms are going to be made available.
Can I, sorry, finish my question?
Yeah.
Do you know where they are? Are they on the ground floor? Whereabouts?
As far as I'm aware, they're on the ground floor.
I'll pick up with the applicant.
Yeah. Okay.
Any more question? Councillor Luki?
Yeah, nice to see you, Councillor Gill. Nice to see a little bit of disruption in the representation in Turnham Green Ward, Gunnersbury Ward. The as long as we don't start fighting outside. What guarantee have we got that the police are the developers are going to give the police? Have you discussed it with officers? Is this going to be secured by Section 106? There's that question, and also I think Councillor Sharma saw a notice on the wall outside the old police station from, I think, might be one of your colleagues saying that the or havoc will break loose. A Clockwork Orange arriving in Chiswick, with loads of violence and mugging of old ladies and men that live in this place. So, what's the reality of this? Is it likely to happen, or is it just something a little bit of wishful thinking?
I wish it was just wishful thinking, but it's not. It's reality. The police have been in touch, and I've been in touch with the Superintendent Anil Puri, and he's been in touch with the developers, and the developers have also confirmed to me that this is what is being made available to them. No doubt you can, of course, question them shortly, and I'm sure they'll be able to give you greater detail as to their discussions with the police, because I was the person who introduced them, because the police asked me that they needed a space, and so I knew there was a space available. And although some of my colleagues thought they would never get a secure place because, you have to have the tasers locked up and all that. So this is being guaranteed by the developers that they will be able to have a space that will be totally secure. So I'm sure one of the rooms will probably be very secure for the police. So I think it's as far as I'm aware, once the building is there, the police will be housed there. And I've done a press release for this, which was in Chiswick W4, and we had a good response on the website.
Yes, Councillor Luki.
And in terms of what you've heard so far from residents and seeking a deferral on this, at least, would you to what extent would you support that, or would you override that just to get what you've discussed with the developers?
Well, I think this is for the residents and the developers to discuss. Really, it's not for me to. I'm no expert. I'm not an architect like Gary Huxley is. But I think, in my opinion, what guarantee is if this development doesn't go through? What guarantee does anybody have that the next developer is going to be any better? Or what guarantees is there that they're going to protect the light or whatever? So, in my opinion, I think this is quite a good development. I'm no expert. I'm an accountant, not a property developer. So I can't tell you. In my opinion, I think it's a great development. So.
Thank you, Councillor Gill. Thank you very much. Can we have now applicant Sam Stackhouse and Honor Barrett, please? Thank you, Sam. Thank you very much. So you have 5 minutes among yourself.
Thank you. So we've got Sam, who's from planning. I'm Honor, I'm the Chief Exec of Birchgrove, and James is our architect from Hunters. And we did come and chat with you a couple of months ago, so I'm hoping that everybody remembers exactly how our business works and how we look after the oldies. So I wanted to just say thank you to Jesse. It's been quite a long 2 years that you've stood by us. You actually started the process by really laying out your stall very strongly. You gave us 3 key directives. You said, London plan, you will never get parking on this site. Do not waste time designing a basement. You won't get it through. There's no, and so we just had to quickly come to terms with, we're going to run a development here. It doesn't have cars and it will need a different plan from us to manage it. I'm definitely not supportive of reducing the 50 parking spaces to 19. It's not a plan I've heard of. It's not being presented to me. I am supportive of as much greenery as we can put into Chiswick, but I'd like to keep the spaces. The second thing you told us is that the building needed to be super sustainable, and you said it needed to fit in with this conservation area. And so we started our process with 2 design review panels, which were a year apart, because we actually made a lot of changes after the first one was fairly diabolical, and they threw it back at us and they said we needed to work harder, the building needed to have more ambition. And I completely understand that architecture is subjective, sorry, but for me, the process was you put the Hounslow delegated architects in front of us to give us clear direction on where they wanted this building to be taken. And so it kind of takes the subjectivity out of it. They told us what they wanted and we had to take their direction. So under your guidance, we've got a building that has a 77% reduction in carbon emission. It has 100% biodiversity net gain, which is really important to us. And it has 0 fossil fuel usage. So for me, this is the greenest building in my entire portfolio. I really hope that for a time, it's actually the greenest building on Chiswick High Road. That would be a really great ambition, I think, for us all to pull off. And the third thing you asked us to do was to put our best foot forward on affordable housing. You were really clear with us that this committee will not sign off anything that doesn't have significant affordable housing in. We spent a year with Adult Social Services talking about how we could make that provision on site. It absolutely was an ambition of ours, but they made the decision that a financial contribution would have more impact in Hounslow where Hounslow needed it, which isn't necessarily on Chiswick High Road. And so they felt the contribution was more impactful. One thing, though, that they would say is that they accepted that our model being rental was more accessible. It's not affordable, but it is absolutely more accessible to more people. And we see across our 3 operational developments that people who have been excluded from retirement living from the for sale model because they don't have a big capital sum can actually get picked up by this rental model. So it's not affordable, but it is more accessible, which is really important to us as a team. Chiswick is an incredibly engaged borough. Sometimes we do local consultations and no one turns up, which is actually quite dispiriting. The reason that we love Chiswick is because everybody turns up. We've done 4 local consultations. They haven't just been tokenism. We genuinely have made lots of changes as a result. But in particular, the Linden Gardens Residents Association have been hugely communicative and really fair and level with us for the last 2 years. And they have helped us achieve a height reduction from 4 stories down to 3 on that section. And crucially, I think pushing the whole building back 2.4 metres is quite a significant manoeuvre, to such an extent that sometimes Garth would send us sketches and we'd all look at it and go, God, that's amazing. And the architect would say, shit, why didn't I think of that? So we definitely have made a lot of changes over the 2-year process, but it's the beginning of a very long consultation. The next 2 years, if you give us permission, there's another 2 years of discussion between us and Linden Residents Association around choice of material, landscaping, all the things that you genuinely believe will make it better. We can put those in as conditions. The process doesn't stop here today. It just goes on into the next 2 years. And then after that, we'll be living there for 30 years.
60 seconds.
Oh, I just wanted to say, for too long, old people get ghettoized in a cul-de-sac overlooking a dual carriageway. And that, for us, we just genuinely don't want that. We want our oldies right at the heart of it. We want them spending money on that high street, litter picking, volunteering. Please don't consign them to somewhere else. Please don't delay this decision. It's taken us 2 years to get the design to this point. We really think it's as good as it can get. And we would love to be able to start looking after another 50 people, older people, and put them in the heart of your community. So we really hope that you will give us some permission tonight, please.
Thank you so much. Questions, Alan, please.
Thank you, Chair. Given what Councillor John Todd was alluding to earlier, I'm quite interested at this late stage, and given what you've heard and the detail in it, what's the most practical amelioration you could offer residents tonight or take away if people were minded to think of deferral that would actually work and that you're prepared to meet?
I think there is so much that we can condition now. We can make so many more decisions together and keep moving forward. I mean, actually, you're the architect.
Yeah, so I'm just going to, I mean, some of the points that Garth rightly raised today, for example, the access to the building. The access to the building has been moved for fundamental reasons. So Garth thinks the access should be on the corner of the building, which is where we had the access. Design review panel, quite rightly, they said the gem about this scheme is the garden. And what we wanted to be able to do is to come into the building and be able to see the light and the garden, which is, you know, the characteristic that we love about this site. And the separation that it actually creates in the location of the access. On the left-hand side, we have a semi-public space. And then on the right, we progress privacy into the lift areas up and access their spaces. So the fundamental thoughts about the design and the ethos of it is very much has been included in the process through many consultee comments. So we haven't just gone away and designed something. This is an evolution in design, and the articulation of those things are quite specific. And I understand where, I mean, Garth raised the issue about the parapet heights. So obviously proportion of the building, and the building is set back to 2.4. So this daylight discussion that we're having, obviously not having a frontage quite so close is going to have a big distance, even though it's higher. But the parapet height again, also proportionately with the roof and the recessed roof works, and it also works from a health and safety point of view of maintaining the recessed space behind. So there's lots of thought about every articulation that we've incorporated within the design. It's not just, obviously, we welcome the comments. We've actually worked with Garth with many of the comments that he's made. We have incorporated those, the addition of a lot of stone, the banding features of the brickwork, all of these things have been incorporated very much because of the positive contribution that has been. But there is a point where there is obviously other consultees, the council themselves, the design review panel, other interested parties. So it is complex, and we have been doing this now for, for 2 years.
Any supplementary?
Yes, it sounds like you're saying that it's already taken place, this amelioration. You know, I mean, clearly it's not satisfying the people entirely tonight. So I'd still be interested in what the nature of the conversation would be if we were minded to defer. What would be the practical thing you could do that would, because I think we're quite close. That's the feeling I get in the room.
So there was comments, weren't there, about articulation of detail. So these are the minor details. So the stone banding, what's the articulation of the stone banding? We could submit detailed sections of what that articulation could be. You can't see it in a 1:100 elevation. Those things, a lot of those things do exist, but those are submitted details. So the stone panel that was discussed, that's actually got great potential for architecture and detail again, which will add, quality to the scheme. Those things can be submitted as detailed items under condition. So there is actually a lot that can be achieved through condition, because the quality of a scheme, and I know people talk about not securing. Well, the reason why a lot of buildings are watered down during the process is because there isn't enough control of the detail. So we are happy to engage in the detail of those elements, and that can happen through the planning process.
Councillor Todd.
Yeah, it's a bit of a waffling answer there. Sorry.
Do you want a planner answer?
No. Let me lead at the moment. Yeah, you're the architect. Linden Gardens is quite clear where there's an option, and you didn't address that. Why?
In which particular item?
They're desperate for a step down. So it is either capable of it, and then it moves on. Some of the other stuff I agree with you is conditionable. But I find there's a sort of secret battle there. I find your comments irritating on cars. You seem to forget what a car park's for, but let's put that to one side. Let's go to the, I see the deferral as a material benefit to both sides where we can get an answer rather than a dreadful, refusal. That's too far. So it's an open question. I'm trying to get you to.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to reiterate some of the things that James has said. First, in the materials, we've got condition 28, which is a condition that relates to materials to be submitted, and this is a very detailed condition. Obviously, because we are in a conservation area, the scrutiny on quality of materials.
That, but can we stick to my question?
So, in terms of
Linden Gardens, drop down, the one you submitted at the outset.
Yeah, I think we have to have faith in the process. Though it's been a 2-year journey, with consultation heavily with officers, the design officers there in particular. I think there's been perhaps 2 different design officers throughout the journey of the history of the application, and 2 design review panels. Talking about 12, 13 different architects, and it is a subjective point, architecture, of course, but we've got to have faith in the process of consultation, and you're never going to make everybody happy. Okay. But this is, as I said, this has been a journey of 2 years of significant consultation.
I understand this is not a personal attack, but really, there's a resolution somewhere, and I accept everything you say.
Well, I think you have to be a little bit careful as well, because you adopt one change, and that upsets another part of the scheme. And we talked about, I think Garth said, you could add some additional height on the High Road. Well, then this is a conservation. There's some sensitive views, and it just unravels another number of issues to unpick, and we can't have any confidence that we could be here in 2 months' time with any resolution, just because there may be new issues that come to the fray that we've managed to design out now. Can
I assume you're not prepared to change that part?
Well, I don't think we are now, not at this stage. I think the materiality, and as I say, these are very detailed conditions.
So your suggestion of conditions is sort of an academic point.
Well, not really. I mean, I think we can guarantee that the condition is detailed enough to ensure there's absolute quality of this scheme, and Chiswick gets a building that it rightly deserves. But I think we're talking about design changes here that don't necessarily serve any kind of wider benefit. Really, it might solve one issue in the mind of one particular resident, perhaps on Linden Gardens. Then equally, we might have a load of objectors come from the High Road because of the additional height. So I think from our perspective, we've gone through a very long process of engagement and consultation, and we stand by that.
You said that, yeah. Of course.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Councillor Stop.
Yeah, thank you very much. At the danger of opening the stable door and letting the parking horse run loose again for a short minute, you said that you looked, and by the way, Jess's advice on parking was very good. You wouldn't have got it probably, but and it was raised to other folk. How do you see your workforce coming in? What modelling have you done on that to say that that vast amounts of parking won't be needed? I seem to recall there was something in the paper about where they were coming from and the modes of transport. Could you just articulate that so that the committee's content that some later date we're not going to be looking for car parking?
Yep. So it came up a little bit earlier, didn't it? We were talking about how many numbers of staff. So we will have 15 members of staff on this development. At any one time, the maximum number on site will be 6 members of staff, of Birchgrove staff, because it's a 24-hour operation, 7 days a week. We absolutely will have up to 22% of our residents will be in receipt of care on a daily basis. And the way it's panned out at the other developments which are open, which is the best guide any of us have of how this might play out, is that one carer arrives at 6:45 in the morning, and she starts the process of getting everybody up, and she gives them the medication, and she knows the people who like to get up at 7:15 and the people who get up at 11:30. She just works through them. Then she goes away for the middle part of the day, and then she comes back and does everything in reverse, and she puts everybody back to bed. So unlike if these 50 people were out there living in the wider Chiswick, and there would be carers going up and down the streets looking for these individual people, you get one carer and everything gets clustered on one site. And it's actually just a much more efficient way for her to lead her life. We don't have any sites that compare to this one. We have one other site that's within the M25, but it's in Kent. It's in the London Borough of Bexley. And the median distance of all the staff on that site travelling to work is 2.3 miles. I honestly cannot see that anybody that we pay is going to be driving 2.5 miles into Chiswick to park for a whole day when it's perfectly easy to get to Chiswick by so many different modes of transport. We don't worry about parking because it's not going to be a problem on this site. When Councillor Bidoff, it is really interesting because she did grow up in Hookheath and she knows it really well. It is a Surrey site with not even a bus route, and there's no other way of getting there. Chiswick is so beautifully well served. There's just no reason why we should worry about our people. But they're on living wage. They earn £13.5 an hour. They are not running a car to drive 2.5 miles to work. They're on the bus.
Councillor Bowring, please.
Yeah, with permission, Chair, 3 quick questions. So the first one was just on the community space. If you could just unpack a bit how that's going to work and sort of a bit unclear on whether costs would be associated. Second question was, you said it's no fossil fuels. If you could explain that a little bit. And then thirdly, if you could just briefly, because this has taken a while, but if you could briefly talk about the process with the design review panel, the changes that you've made, sort of questions around conservation and the visual outlook.
All right. Shall I do community management? So, I just said one of our things is that we hate it when you put old people down the end of a cul-de-sac. When you put them in the middle of the high street, you do have to actually work quite hard that they're not still ghettoized, which is why we don't lock our front doors. It has to be an incredibly porous community. Otherwise, they don't feel part of something. So when the planning team said to us, you're going to have to put in community space, we were like, this is amazing, because it's what we want to do on all the other developments. And so we like having the U3A, cribbage. I mean, you know what it's like. There's outside groups coming into our building all the time. And all this asked us to do was formalize that with a community management program. So it's what we do already. We're just overjoyed that it's actually got a formal name now. The thing with the police, it's just been so fantastic for us to be able to build that relationship. They, as Councillor Gill said, they just spend all their time commuting, and they would love to have a base. PC Cope says that he never has quiet space where he can call back a victim of a crime and have a private conversation. So the 2 rooms that we referred to, we've got one large community space room, which is where he can meet all 10 members of his staff at once and have a team meeting. And then we've got a smaller office space, which is just space. I mean, space is useful, isn't it? He can go in there and have private phone calls. He said he's really grateful that people like Pret a Manger allow them to go in and have free coffees and stuff like that, but it's not appropriate if he's using his laptop screen from a GDPR point of view. He can't actually do any work in Pret a Manger. So those are the 2 rooms, one smaller, very private for phone calls, and one bigger for team meetings.
Is that the admin office on the plans?
It's actually called Discovery Room. Sorry, Discovery Room. It's blue. Yeah. So it's quite discreet, tucked away. Okay, then we went to fossil.
Okay, so the question about fossil fuels. So this development's super energy efficient. So the first thing we've done is reduce the load through the fabric. So the demand for heating and cooling. So that's all done through the fabric. We've got 79 square meters of photovoltaics on the roof, and we've got heat pumps. So saying no fossil fuels, we mean there's no gas boilers. So traditionally these schemes would have a communal heating system, which would usually heat and do all the other things. We don't need that. We've reduced the load, made it super efficient.
No gas even in the kitchens?
No gas.
You have one more design review panel.
on,
You said-
sorry, can you repeat the question on the
Yeah,
design?
just very briefly,
Yeah.
just with the process you've been through with the design review panel and in terms of questions of conservation and appearance and beauty and.
Yeah, so as you probably will know, the design review panel has a number of experts who sit, and they all come from different specialisms. So some of them will be energy, some of them landscape, some heritage. So our first design review panel had some fundamental changes, one of which would be the access to the entrance. So their perception may have been quite a long way different to what some architects or some people would anticipate as an attractive building. Some of their views are quite sort of avant-garde, so we have to temper those with the heritage, the officers, design review panel. So the first meeting, it was a fundamental redesign of the building, and the second meeting was much more positive. I think there are much more acceptance, but we still had a number of comments from that. So it wasn't a stop point there. It wasn't a big tick in the box. It was go away and do further work, which we've been doing ever since with the council. So it is, yeah, it's been fundamental in the design.
Thank you. Councillor Luki.
Thank you, Chair. I can't remember when you came down and and you presented to us. It's not in the report actually, and my memory is not that great. But my memory is good in terms of in terms of what you were proposing, and then I was reminded when we visited the site on Thursday last week, where where all of a sudden we've got the and in the report, all of a sudden we've got that build up next to the fire station flats there. Because when you presented to us, it wasn't there. We assumed there would be a gap there, a space there, break it up a bit. Yeah, I'm just wondering whether that's yourselves or the design review panel. That's one thing. And you call it a 2-year journey with the residents of Linden Gardens. And at what point was the dropping of that the raising of that end of terrace sprung upon them? You know, we welcome your offer to support during condition making, but bulk is something that's going to be decided tonight, would be decided tonight if it's not deferred. You know, why yeah, I'm happy. I mean, I do know, you know, so many years on this blooming committee that we can work on conditions, sometimes not that successfully in terms of design logistic plans and logistic construction logistic plans, for example. But why can't you consider the that end terrace there on Linden Gardens as something that could be revisited? We're okay with the designs, you know, whether you put gargoyles on them like Lincoln Cathedral, that'd be good, wouldn't it? But you know, why can't you just answer me the question why you drop that gap, and why you and then tell me why you can't tell committee why you can't revisit that, just to satisfy a lot of people, because we've seen it when we went down there, the lack of gap when you're going to build behind as well. And we talk about the design the guidelines on light. They're just guidelines, you know. To what extent can you improve on the guideline that's being adopted for the light, particularly at the place next door? So at the moment, well, I went up the stairs on the fire escape to the fire station, to the police station, and saw that there was space there to fix the potentially fix a light at the front, but not necessarily at the back, and that needs to be examined. That's a lot there, but you know, this is an important development. You can't go back on it if we approve it tonight, but you could if we look to defer it.
Yeah, I'll take that one, Councillor. Thank you. I think, as you said, it was a gap we're talking about. Obviously, was part of our scheme previously, and we reinstated it back as part of our proposals, which was then reconsulted on. Obviously, the public and other consultees have had an opportunity to comment on it. We were encouraged to explore that with officers, and we kind of looked quite carefully of what the impacts of what that additional story would be from an impact on neighbouring amenity perspective. And as you've seen from the officer report, there's no technical reason to suggest why we couldn't incorporate that additional floor for that part of the building. We talked about 99.1% of windows meeting the criteria, but actually all of windows on Linden Gardens do satisfy the BRE guidelines. The three of the windows are two are on Prince of Wales Terrace and one's on Chiswick High Road. So there's no obvious amenity reason to reduce that, and that additional unit was negotiated with officers on the back of some reduction in height on the building on Prince of Wales Terrace, because of concerns of impact on amenity from that part of the site. So as I mentioned earlier, it's all very carefully balanced. As I say, you add one bit in one place, and then you upset other bits in another place. And that's the kind of journey we've been on, where we got to the point where I think architecturally, it looks cleaner actually just having a consistent height, and there was no obvious amenity impacts, just why we shouldn't do that. Where conversely on Prince of Wales Terrace, if we did have that, replace that additional unit there would be greater impacts that we felt were not as easily as mitigated.
Thank you. Councillor Sharma.
Thank you, Chair. So with this extra care facilities, obviously you're going to have your staff on site, and the care staff are going to need to be trained, and they're going to be skilled. So they're going to be moving and handling, medication administration, using hoists, etc., etc. Will they be getting apprenticeships like MVQ? Will you be supporting them with full training? Because obviously their salaries are quite low and they need to be empowered. Will they be given apprenticeships for MVQs and QCFs, etc.?
So that the carer's employer will be the domiciliary care provider that we choose to hook into. I would say, so I don't train them, their employer does. I fundamentally know that those girls at the end of every month, the only hot meals they're eating are the ones that they have during their shift when they're at Birchgrove, because they are really lowly paid. And so we try and give everybody 2 hot meals per shift. They have a really nice uniform, they have a nice staff room. We try and make their lives a bit better in lots of other ways, because we're not their employers, but we can have a massive impact on their happiness. I think that they enjoy working for us because they're not driving around the borough. They're very consistently, they know their customers, service users as they call them. They know them. That's very consistent delivery. That's where I think we can have real impact. So I can't train them, but I can do lots of other things to make it a bit easier. My own staff, I train with moving and handling, but I can't do medication.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Last one.
Yeah, sorry. So you said that you don't train them. You obviously train your own staff. But would it not be a good idea to get a provider that comes in that has a high quality of care, that actually takes care of their staff and wants to have them progress, so they're not lowly paid and only eat once a day?
So we try to get the very best local business, which tends to be, so we don't choose the big national providers. We don't really work with franchises. We tend to use that local run business that's been going for a good amount of time and they know their customers really well. It's a funny balance, isn't it, between how much, when you're having 4 care calls a day, the price really racks up. It's a really interesting balance about how much you pay people and how much it costs to buy care. We try and make the right decision, which seems to be mostly about consistency of staff, that the team love working for that domiciliary care provider and they stay for a long time. It's a complicated thing, care, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Todd, last one.
Yeah. Can I ask you, Anna, please? It's quite a fascinating business model you've got where you charge, I think it's circa 60,000 a year to stay there.
Mm.
And yet staff are having to be given food because their wages are so poor, but I'll put that comment to one side. But I didn't really understand.
Councillor, let's planning.
I'm going.
Like we can't give them a business ideas and business criticism on the business. Let's talk planning questions.
That's a very strong intervention. I'm trying very hard to get to my point. So,
like
will you give me a sentence? Or two?
No, we like.
Okay, I'll put that to one side.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, I'll change. Brand new sentence. Yeah. What's the obligation of Hounslow Council in respect of your residents who run out of cash?
That's a really good question. It hasn't happened to us yet. Our residents have a full financial assessment before they move in. They're incredibly conservative in nature because they don't want to run out of money, just as we don't want them to run out of money. That's like everybody's worst nightmare, isn't it? Our residents are leaving us mostly for dementia, so we can support dementia. I mean, we work really hard to go all the way with dementia. It gets tricky if you're alone and not with a spouse. Sometimes that dementia just takes you too far and you do have to move out. But 11% of our residents have a cognitive impairment. At some point, anybody who lives in the borough, if they go below £26,000, they will become someone that the borough has to step into. Our job is to keep them fit and healthy so their care needs are less. The care that we provide as a team means that they're not necessarily paying for additional CQC regulated care because we're doing so much with them, keeping them busy and stimulated and healthy. That's kind of what we do. And so we try to we try to get to a point where no one ever ends up needing the state to help them out. And so far, we've done really well at that.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your help.
Are we allowed to say one more thing?
Please.
No, just deferring it. It's been a really, really long process. It has been 2 years. And every day that we're not open is another day that, you know, out there in the borough, there are lots of older people who are living on their own in under-occupied houses. And we would really love it to be able to get them to come and live with us.
Thank you very much. Josie.
All right. Just had a few points to raise. Firstly, of course, matter of deferral was raised to consider certain design interventions. I just want to give members very strong reassurance that we have had very detailed discussions on the design, including explicitly some of the comments that were raised. For example, the location of the entrance was very carefully considered. It's been positioned there so as to have a very strong visual link with the garden in the center courtyard space and to shorten the distance between the actual residential homes. In terms of the height on Linden Gardens, I know we discussed whether or not there was potential for that height to be housed somewhere else on site. We have very clearly considered this. One of the intermediate designs presented to us by the applicant included an extra story on that rear Prince of Wales terrace block. And upon assessing that, because of the proximity to the rear of Linden Gardens, and that's that property we've been discussing directly to the south of the site, it would be about 8 meters from that rear facing habitable rooms on that property, which is a lot closer than the separation distance across Linden Gardens, which is 18 meters. So having looked at that, that was considered to have a harmful impact there. However, where it's been positioned adjacent to that flank wall of the neighboring site to the south, there would be no impacts in terms of overlooking, and all of the daylight and sunlight for all of the surrounding neighbors on Linden Gardens does accord with BRE guidance. So that's why we've decided that that is an acceptable location for that height. And if I just go to an image, can we go to the, so apologies, this wasn't included before. I've now sent through an image. If you look at the top of the screen, that's the scheme that was presented to us when the application was originally submitted. And then the bottom is what's before you now following the amendments. So what you can clearly see is that some of the height along the Linden Gardens elevation has been reduced. So the overall height and bulk of the Linden Gardens elevation has been reduced, but that last kind of module on the south of the site has been increased, but the overall height and bulk on Linden Gardens has been reduced. Again, just to reiterate, there would be no loss of car parking on the site as part of the proposal. The scheme performs very well in terms of daylight and sunlight. And overall, as we said, the application is recommended for approval subject to the conditions in the legal agreement. But as just a final point, as the applicant did address, we do have a condition recommended for the details of all of the materials, and that includes detailed drawings of all of the design elements, which would be secured and then critiqued at a later stage.
Thank you, Jesse. Let's discussion. Councillor Costigan? Councillor Luke.
Thanks for that. I didn't really get the answer from the applicants as to when the this new design came in since our meeting here with them. There's that. You mentioned the agreeing of those conditions on design and detail. That's fine. We understand that. How many more matters on this application are in reserve, and how many of those will be addressed by discussions between officers, planning officers, and the developer, and where do the residents, or where would the residents and neighbours get a look in examining this? Because I do notice this from my from developments in my ward that they tend to avoid involving residents or councillors for that matter without any unless they ask for involvement. So if you can give us a list so we can record it if people don't understand it right now, but which reserved matters are you going to be working out until and how long will they take, and whether those reserved matters can be done in tandem with or be brought back to a deferred meeting, or perhaps if this is deferred to consider heights and other details, parapets, for example. When could that be brought? Couldn't they be brought back together?
So just as a technical point, so the application is recommended for approval subject to conditions. So that's not reserved matters. Reserved matters is a different technical process with permission in principle being granted, which is not before you. Yes, so that this is conditions. There are 30 conditions recommended, some of which require explicit application to the local planning authority for approval, some of which are just compliance conditions, and they range in matters from landscaping materials to more technical matters on things such as flood risk and noise verification and whatnot. So those would all be applied for if necessary after permission is granted, and there's no statutory requirement for public consultation. So therefore, they would apply for them, and as always, all of this would be published on our website, and anyone could comment or view these applications, but there wouldn't be a statutory consultation as there would be for a main planning application.
How would they be, how will people be made aware of those? There's a lot of people here with interests, for example, Linden Gardens Residents Associations, even Councillor Todd perhaps, maybe one or two of the current ward councillors. How would they be, how would these conditions be shared, draft conditions be shared?
Again, so there would be no statutory consultation, so there'd be no duty on the local planning authority to notify local residents of such an application explicitly so. But again, if they searched on the website, it's all available, but we don't carry out a formal consultation. And that's consistent for all conditions approvals.
I agree, but sorry, how will they know? I mean, it's a bit Kafkaesque, isn't it? If you know, they're going to be there, but they don't know that they're going to be there. You know, I don't.
No, the thing is that we have a planning application. So there are 30 conditions. So those 30 conditions will be on website. So there's no statutory requirement for the planning. So it's up to the developer and the people to engage with each other. As a planning committee, that's not in our jurisdiction to make sure that we use something extra, which is not statutory available.
Understood. It doesn't have to come to planning, but there's a number of people that know that it's going to happen, that they're going to be they're going to be developed these considerations and conditions, and that includes planning officers. There's a lot of interest here.
Yes,
they've
and
worked together for
they
2
are
years.
they are communicating with each other.
Are they?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yes, they.
Oh, shaking the head, Chair.
That we have moved from there to today to discuss this planning application. So those conditions, 30 conditions, so that's not statutory requirement for the officers and the developer.
I'll leave it to the community and officers and what is important. But I know from one of my planning applications. Sorry, hang on a sec. Well, one of my planning applications in my ward, we
No, can we not go there, Tony? Not.
Well, it's the same thing.
Councillor,
Things
look, we
get-
should not go to
Okay,
particular
okay,
planning
Chair,
application on
okay.
your ward.
Well, this
Well,
is
like
this is
they-
a precedent. Cheers.
If I may just come in there, for a start, if you approve today, the permission will not be granted tomorrow because there's a 106 to go through, and so it will be subject to that 106. During that time, hopefully, what would be then done on those conditions, on materials, etc., and as has been indicated to you already, when those come in, they go on the website, on the application website. So anybody can see those on the application website.
All of them?
Please, we heard you all. So this is now the members to discuss this. Councillor Browning.
Yeah, Chair, I realise there are some sort of challenges with this building, particularly for residents. The thing for me is I can see there's no material planning conditions for refusal, as far as I can see. And in terms of deferral, I don't see what that would achieve. I think I do appreciate the point made about balance, about how we've got to this final plan, and you can't just go, well, can we cut this bit out, because then that affects everything else. So I think we should approve this with the conditions on boundary treatments, and if we can, something quite formal with teeth in terms of the community use in perpetuity.
So we have approval on the table. Any seconder? Okay. And let's vote on that in favor of approval. Sorry.
Sorry, excuse me, everyone. Councillor Bowring's moved approval with an additional condition. So can I just clarify that point? Would you be able to elaborate on the additional condition? And I think I already know because you said it right at the start of the meeting, but it's okay to elaborate what condition you're asking to be amended.
So in this image, it's the first property on Linden Gardens. It's the garden, and there were two specific concerns that the resident had on overlooking, one of which was from, I think it was called, was it the boardwalk or the?
I can help. It was the
The
flat
deck
roof to the
access.
rear.
Yeah.
And access to that, I believe, was the issue.
That was the second issue, but there was another issue.
Yeah, but so there was the
boardwalk,
rear obscure window, and then there was obscure boundary treatment to the deck access of the
Deck,
taller
yeah, the
elements.
deck
And that would
access.
be an amendment to condition 29, which is the landscaping
Yeah.
condition.
So it's the deck access, which is further back in the site, which is going to overlook, so just around some sort of opacity. And then it's the flat roof on the properties that abut onto Prince of Wales Terrace, just that would be obscured glass and just some kind of understanding that would be a lockable door, that flat roof wouldn't be used as an amenity space, just for vital maintenance.
Yes, so that condition for restricting the use so that it's not used at any times for amenity has already been recommended, but in terms of the opacity of that window, that could be explicitly referenced in the condition, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. Sorry, so that, just to clarify, so that the motion is approval subject to that condition, the amendment to that condition.
Shall I get a vote on that for approval? For refuse, sorry, for any against? Abstentions? So it's approved. Thank you. Shall we break for 5 minutes?
Yes, please.
Yes, thank you. Members, shall we start again, please? Agenda item 5, land at Rothbury Gardens. Can I ask Sophie, please?
Good evening, councillors. So you have seen this application before at Planning Committee in December. So just to briefly go over the application. The site is located on the southeast side of Rothbury Gardens, bounded to the north by the existing single-storey garages and the south by the railway line and Syon Lane station. There is currently a footpath that runs diagonally through the site connecting Rothbury Gardens and Syon Lane station. The proposal being considered here tonight is for the erection of 9 additional family homes. Access to the site will be provided by 2 new access points on the southwest and northwestern side of the site. And then the proposal also includes improvements to the existing footpath between Rothbury Gardens and the station. In total, 14 objections have been received, focusing on the loss of the existing open land, the existing covenant, risk of flooding, increased noise and disturbance, lack of consultation with the residents, and then loss of light, failure to demonstrate an acceptable impact on the highways network, and unsustainable location in relation to public transport. The provision of the development is considered acceptable on this land. As discussed at the previous committee, this application was deferred to determine the lawful use of the site. The site was used as allotments, but this use did cease in 1991. This use was never statutory under the Allotments Act of 1925. And then there was a temporary attempt to revive the land as an allotment between 2010 and 2016, allotment / community garden. But again, that was never formally recognised by the council. So twice the land has been vacant or vacant over that period. And it's considered that, considering it has been vacant for 25 of the 33 last years, that the allotment use in planning terms has been abandoned and should not be considered as a factor within this application. So in terms of the development, we will be proposing 9 highly sustainable, well-designed family homes. There'll be an increase in landscaping when compared to existing, including the planting of 21 new trees. The development will be visually in keeping with the surrounding area and will result in the creation of a good living environment. It is not considered to result in significant harm to the living conditions of neighbouring property for the reason of loss of daylight, sunlight, or outlook. The use of obscure glazing would prevent overlooking and loss of privacy. All units would significantly exceed the minimum space standards. Whilst there would be a slight shortfall in the provision of private amenity space, this is considered to be outweighed by the well in excess internal space standards that have been provided. The development would provide 9 car parking spaces as well as cycle and waste storage for each house, and would not generate any issues in relation to chip generations. Full details of the access would be secured prior to occupation to ensure there was no harm to vehicular and pedestrian safety. On the basis of the above, approval is recommended subject to conditions and a section 106, just including one additional condition that wasn't included in the officer's report, to secure a car parking management plan to ensure that there's no additional parking on site outside the designated bays. Questions?
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Lucky, please.
Yeah, thank you. I'll come back to the site use at some point. And in terms of residents' concerns, on the Thames Water report and the additional documents and the additional documents for this application, there's mention of a slight flood attenuation installation. This I think officers were sent photographs of floods on Rothbury Gardens before, and this is quite historic. And it's also, and floods have also been. What's not in the report is all the previous planning applications, and there's I think it's in planning application P10 where it was flooding was a factor for refusing that, and that was and that's quite detailed. And Thames Water even agreed that there was flooding down there, and that's not been included in the report. And I would say that if this was approved, flood attenuation tanks should be more extensive across the site, because bear in mind that this comes down. There's a 15-meter difference between the Great West Road and the bottom of Rothbury Gardens, and water does come down from there and accumulates. And with any development, if there's no unlike when there were allotments or open space, that would absorb the rain, but it doesn't here. The next issue that concerns us and concerns residents, it concerns ward councillors and concerns residents in the report and in the bin store location. Why there's no reason why. There's no reason why bins cannot be located within the curtilage of the houses. There are scattered bin storage areas, and we know that people where there are remote bin storage areas, they're not well managed. Nobody takes responsibility, and the one that particularly the one outside at the back gardens of number 6 and number 8 Rothbury Gardens, they're not they are remote, and the residents there don't want rubbish smelling in the summertime should this development go ahead. Good to see there'll be no eligibility for CPZ permits in this with this application should it get permission. And there's I note that there is no construction logistics plan, Chair. I can talk about that here now. And that we have experience of bad or no construction logistic plans for small developments in my ward and perhaps in other wards. So that needs to be that we need something thorough there, which doesn't appear in the documents. This was allotment space. This is allotment space. It was prevented from continuing to be allotment space. And it was managed by the London Borough of Hounslow. Half of it was developed. The rest of it remained allotment space. And then later on in the 2020s, it was a community allotment space, and it was very, very well managed. And it wasn't just community allotment, but individuals had plots. There are residents who had plots. So what we don't see here is we don't recognise it. It's not recorded. It's not recognised. But I do have a number of Sophie was generous, and we swapped. I swapped pictures of the allotments in use, and she swapped reports, application P9, P10, P11, previous applications. Earlier ones were mentioned, later ones were mentioned, but these are not there. And in these, they're described in the local plan at the time and since it has been local open space. The same status as what's the allotments in your ward, Councillor Stroud-Turp? Isleworth Sign Park allotments there. The Duke of Northumberland's allotments there, which had a good victory. And also in these reports, it mentions previous planning inspectorate, previous planning inspectorate appeals, which were dismissed on the building of houses and flats on that bit of space there, because because we do have, and that's one of the reasons I asked a question earlier on about Section 106 and having that agreement on Section 106 for the Chiswick site. Sorry, I mentioned another application, but we did only just about a year ago refuse the Section 106, refuse a rescinding of that Section 106 when the developer wanted to take it away in order to develop the site. And it does appear in this application, but again, that's something to discuss. We have a lot of there's a lot of history here. We have a
Councillor Luki,
I will.
shall
Okay,
we
so all
stick
those
to
are questions.
questions,
Chair.
questions,
Yeah,
and
all
then we
these are
discuss.
questions. One. What do we? How can we? How can we increase the flood attenuation tanks should it be approved? How do we relocate bin stores to within house curtilages? How can we confirm that no eligibility for CPZ permits? Where is even the draft? When are we going to get even the draft construction logistic plan? How do we address the loss? Not so much of allotment space, or whether it is I looked at 1925 Allotments Act. That's it doesn't refer to this, but there are other Allotments Act, and we do have this down as open space. So when did this stop becoming? When did it stop becoming green? I can explain when we discuss this, but when did this stop becoming green space or the green land? That's no specific planning description of green land. When did it stop becoming a local open space as described in previous reports? That's about it for the time being. In the most recent refusal of P14, the 9 houses, there are a number of issues of why it should be developed on this land. And I'm just wondering why there should be that change there. That's my questions. Unless anybody else has questions, Chair, thank you for your time.
So in regards to flood risk, condition 17 of the application requires the details which as part of the application to be evidence to be submitted, photographs, copies of installation contracts to confirm that the SUDS measures proposed have been implemented prior to the occupation of the development. So there will be an improvement on that sustainable urban drainage in comparison to existing, when the existing scheme obviously the flooding happened even when the land was green, was not tarmacked over, was not concrete over. So therefore there will be an improvement compared to that situation through the use of sustainable urban drainage measures. In relation to the construction logistics plan, you mentioned condition 7 of the application requires submission of a construction logistics plan prior to any development on site. And similarly, in regards to bin storage with conditioning, just find the exact number, requiring, again, condition 12, which requires full details for the storing of waste and recycling materials. In consultation with the waste and recycling team, the proposed scheme, which included the 2 waste and recycling stores, was what they would prefer. However, obviously that can be looked at again at condition stage if the applicant is able to propose an alternative solution. Obviously, we do have to be mindful of ensuring carrying distances are minimised for future residents. There would be a requirement, obviously, to return bins to and from the collection point on collection day to ensure they're not stored on the highway for any long length of time. So then, with regards to the local open space, I did speak to my colleagues in planning policy about this, and it appears that within some point that the site was no longer designated as local open space within the local open plan. It appears from 2013 there's documents that show that the site was no longer designated as local open space. Obviously, I'm not a planning policy colleague, and they weren't able to provide an exact example of why that was the case. But for the designation of local open space was removed from the site, showing that there wasn't a deficiency in local open space within that area. Within kind of in the early 2000s, and that designation was then removed from the site. So as the site is not designated as local open space anymore, the loss of local open space cannot be considered as part of this application. we have to consider the application on the basis of the material considerations that are before us, which local open space is not one of them. So the 106 obligation, as we discussed in the previous committee, the 1997 agreement, which prevented development on the green land, green being simply the colour that it was sketched on the map rather than necessarily a designation of the land itself, was originally to provide a visual break between the Northumberland estate and the playing fields. It was never designated as green land to provide amenity space for residents. So it's now considered that that removal of the existing covenant is that visual break isn't needed as it was back in 1997 when the original permission was refused. Obviously, Hounslow is a much denser suburban context is considered that the site and the proposed development, which retains adequate spacing between the dwellings when compared to previous submissions on the site, notably the P14 application, would still retain that degree of visual break without the need for the existing covenant. So the section 106 would remove the covenant and it would allow only this development to then come forward on the land without being in breach of that covenant.
Thank you, Sophie. Any supplementary, Tony?
I'd like to know how was that 2013 removal? It's not removed. You know, where is the evidence of that? In the same way as you saw, officers saw evidence from myself on the use of this space, and as I said, you kindly swapped documents with me to show me those documents that are missing in the sequence of these applications on this report. Yeah, I'm just wondering why that information is only coming out now when to be honest this started back in 2020 2019 even when the site was raised. Planning enforcement know all about this because they were planning enforcement know about this because they were approached and it was raised with them and they sent stop notices, and plus it's not concreted over, it's been gravelled down. All that organic material below is gravelled down, and that was put there when the containers were put there, and now they've been removed, although they've left a lot of mess there. So where is that evidence?
Sorry to intervene.
This?
Can I point of order, please? Can I ask for suspension of standing orders?
Seconded.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we won't be able to let Councillor Lukey finish.
Thank you.
Well, that's not the point, Councillor Trout-Turp, all right? Yeah, there's plenty more items on the agenda too, but thank you for raising that.
Thank you.
Sophie.
So with regards to the evidence, obviously, as I said before, the use of as the allotment, historically, you only brought up two officers at the last committee meeting. Until that last committee meeting, officers were aware of the use of the allotments that ceased in 1991, which has been noted in historic officer reports as a use that ceased in a temporary use that ceased in 1991. That use was never permanent. I was not aware of the use between 2010 and 2016 until you brought it up at that last committee meeting. You did not bring it up as part of the discussion you had with me prior to the meeting, and you did not bring it up as part of the discussion on the previous application refused for residential units on the site. So as the committee report kind of that, obviously a lot of the information you provided and was provided by the agent contained personal information, which obviously we can't make available to members of the public within the committee report. So the timeline of the site was set out within the report. Between 1991 and 2010, the site was vacant. And 2010 and 2016, including the link to that blog that you sent me, which did outline that use ceased at the end of 2015. The site was in use as an allotment / community garden run by the Syon Lane Community Allotment Society. That use again is not considered a statutory allotment in accordance with the Allotments Act. And then between 2016 and 2010, the site was again vacant. And then in 2020, that was when the storage containers were first on site, and then planning enforcement obviously did take action in that case.
Thank you, Sophie. Councillor Mohammed.
Thank you, Chair. My question is, have the point have been resolved since the last meeting, when the last meeting, the plan was the defer, and what is the update? Is there any point is left, or is
So-
it been solved from the developer?
So as I updated before, the use of the temporary allotments, which we believe were won by land owned by British Rail, obviously now Network Rail, ceased in 1991. This use was never considered to be a statutory allotment under the Allotments Act of 1925. And then there was a temporary revival of this use between 2010 and 2016. And obviously, this didn't pass the 10 years that we would then be able to have considered it to be the lawful use of the site again. So given that for 25 of the last 33 years, the site has been vacant, it is considered the use of the allotments has ceased. So we're not considering that there is the lawful use of the site is not considered to be allotments. The lawful use of the site is simply considered to be vacant land.
Thank you, sir.
Councillor Straub.
Thank you very much, Chair. We did get a long way down the road last time this came, and we deferred it for one specific question, as I remember, which was to determine whether allotments originally ceased to be, and if indeed they were still legally regarded as allotments. It might be useful to get a legal view on this, because if the legal view is they are not now regarded as allotments, then we can move ahead and disregard this, even though I accept, and a keen allotment to myself, it is a big issue, but we could talk about this for quite a long time. So if we could get a definitive ruling, then move on and discuss the merits of the application, please.
Yeah, happy to do that, Councillor. I've looked at this. I'm quite satisfied that the use as allotment land has been abandoned. In fact, so much so it's happened twice. It has never been statutory allotment, so we're not looking at it's not afforded any statutory protection, and actually not much is. And weirdly, nowadays, statutory protection under the Allotments Act is not as good as it once was. Nevertheless, it was abandoned in 1991. It was revived in 2016. 2010 to 2016. Since 2016, we're now in 2024. And as Sophie's rightly said, 25 out of those 33 years, it has not been in use as allotment land. The only lawful use it's ever had during that time has been allotment land, of course, because the storage containers was unlawful. But it is so absolutely clear that that use as allotment land has been abandoned. And as I say, despite the brave attempts in 2010 by the Community Allotment Association, that was abandoned in 2016, and it has not been revived since.
Thank you. Councillor Luki.
Whilst it might not have been used as allotment for a period of time, it was designated as designated as open space, local open space, and that was removed in 2013, unannounced, unaware by the community that it was that it was removed at that time. We can still consider we can still consider the status of the land, can't we, and developing the status of open space, because there is still a legal agreement as we talk about it now. There's still a legal agreement to maintain it. In fact, the legal agreement was tested less than a year ago, or about a year ago, and that was the application there was refused. So we're looking at open space here rather than specifically allotments.
If I may, Chairman, I think Councillor Luke is conflating two issues. One is it open space, which was some form of a localised planning designation, which was removed in 2013. I don't know why it was removed in 2013. Sophie doesn't know why it was removed in 2013. That's over 10 years ago, and it has been removed. That's one issue. The second issue is around the covenant, I think in an earlier 106 agreement, I think you referred to. Well, yes, it is there. If the need for that no longer exists, and there, again, that's been pointed out to you, it was there to protect in relation to the Northumberland estate, as I understand it. If that issue is no longer required, then it's a matter for whether or not that covenant is removed as part of this application. So it forms part of this application. If you don't like that, you would refuse the application because you'd say we want to keep that covenant going. But part of this application is that under the new 106 will go.
Thank you. Any more question? Okay. Thank you, Sophie. Discussion?
Well, nothing's changed. Nothing's changed here, Chair. There's open space. That open space is still open space across the road from number 9 to 23 Rothbury Gardens. It's not changed since 1997. Whatever the use of the site was, whether it was allotments, it was always open space, and they refer to it as open space, local open space here. No one's been given a chance to address that new designation. The houses on the other side of the road are still there. The garages are still there. Now we've our friend, the Secretary of State for whatever his name, I know his name, I can't remember what his department's called, Mr. Gove, he's given permission for 2,100 odd flats in the neighbourhood. There's no other open space there. There's a demand for allotments. There's a potential for allotments here. And there's no reason why we should approve this to lose this space when we've got all these folk turning up. And we've already got, if Councillor Salman Shaheen was here, he would tell you how many people are on the waiting list for allotments. I know we've only got one allotment in the ward, in the neighbourhood, that's got 7 allotments, and there's a waiting list of another 7 people there. So I would move refusal on this if somebody wants to support that, and for reason of developing on open space.
Sorry.
Chair.
There is Mr. William here from, is he here?
He's not here. No, he's not here. Mr. Ros Williams, he's not here. But he would agree with me.
There are speakers in the applicants. Yes. Tony, we have applicants.
Let them
Yes,
speak.
please.
You should have said that beforehand, before I started spouting. Well, somebody should have. I'm concerned about that.
Mr. Roycroft? Yes, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, councillors, chair. My name's Dan Roycroft. I'm a chartered town planner and the agent for the application. So the first thing I just want to point out as a kind of partly separate matter is the storage containers have now all been removed from the site, as was promised to you at the December committee. So they are all now gone. In terms of the application in front of you, I would like to just briefly talk to you about the process we've been through with officers to get to this point. So this started in May 22. We submitted an application for 9 homes. That was refused due to impact on neighbouring occupiers and character of the area. Following that refusal, we worked carefully through the council's really detailed comments as to what they didn't like about the scheme and revised proposals in response to that. That broadly consisted of reductions in height and the scale, some of the massing broken up of the buildings, and increases to the external amenity spaces for all the units. In July 22, we then sent that amended proposal to the council for pre-application advice. And the council provided us a very detailed response to that in August 22, which did include responses from all of your specialist consultees, including your urban design surgery, where 3 principal urban design officers discussed the scheme and fed into the comments, issues or tweaks they would like changed to the scheme. The response was overwhelmingly supportive, suggesting only minor amendments prior to submission, as well as recommending consultation with neighbours and ward councillors. We made those further amendments, and at the end of October 22, we mailed a consultation leaflet to 27 near neighbours, all 3 ward councillors, the Isleworth Society, Network Rail, and the Osterley and White Green Residents Association. That provided details of the development proposed, gave all our details to request comments be made to us by the 18th of November. And to date, no comments from any of those parties have been received directly to us. We had a comment back from the Osterley and White Green Residents Association asking for a PDF copy be sent to them, which we did, and they acknowledged receipt and thanked us for that, but no further engagement was heard directly with us from residents at all. In August 23, we submitted this application. So it proposes a development site with 9 high-quality homes. Now, from the start, high-quality design has been at the forefront of these proposals, and the applicant has been very particular with which architect was chosen to pull this scheme forward. They're not cookie-cutter house types. They are bespoke homes. They're designed in a really responsive manner to the character of the surrounding area. And internally, they're very high quality. They exceed the nationally described space standards. And externally, they all benefit from suitably shaped and orientated private gardens, as well as communal amenity space. The housing mix has also been tailored to local circumstances. They provide entirely family-sized homes. 8 of the 9 homes are 3 bedrooms, which is by a long way the most in-demand housing type in the borough, with your latest evidence showing 54% of all your housing need is 3-bed houses. In terms of sustainability, the buildings will provide a 90.45% saving over building regulations. That's achieved through improved fabric, air source heat pumps, solar panels. There's a scheme for water fittings, which allows the homes to meet a target consumption of 105 litres per person per day. Windows will be triple glazed, and all the parking spaces that are provided on the site are done so with EV charging points. In terms of flood risk, a flood risk assessment and sustainable drainage strategy was submitted with the application. Councillor Lukey is absolutely right that there is an issue with infiltration on the site. So that surface water scheme proposes a calculated attenuation, so it can then be released at greenfield rate to the public sewer. Officers haven't raised any objection to that, and as you've heard, that is conditioned. In terms of neighbouring amenity, with developments well spaced, orientated to avoid impact, with some areas of obscure glazing proposed. And then a final really important part of the scheme is the improved pedestrian link to Sarn Lane Station. You would have seen from the photos at the moment that is a very narrow, uninviting, dangerous looking alley. We have amended that as part of the proposal so that actually that comes through the site, past the front of the houses. There is natural surveillance. It's got wide open access, and will just be much safer, even if not materially, but certainly in terms of perception for people using that access. You've heard about the legal agreement that would be amended as part of this proposal. And I think that's it for me, really. We're looking to create really a high quality proposal for 9 new, much needed family homes in the borough, with officers agreeing there is not a material impact on neighbours or other aspects. I appreciate there has been huge concerns from neighbours regarding the storage use of the site, but that has ceased and is not part of this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you, Roy. Thanks a lot. discussion now. Councillor Luki, you put
It's still on the table, Chair. My recommendation. You know, I'll chat. I'm not going. I wasn't going to enter any discussion or argument with the applicant's representative, but the fact that we had a residents' meeting with the developers, we goaded them into not goaded them. We encouraged them with the help of the director of planning to come to a meeting at St Francis of Assisi Church when 30 neighbours turned up. They did not; those communications did not come through. Osprey White Green Residents Association only responded when they were made aware of this development when councillors informed them. So this has been, apart from all the kind of the bad communications, we are looking at an application here to build on virgin land. No matter how much they attempted to damage it with containers, and perhaps the applicant's representative can take it back. The site is still not cleared. There are no containers, but it's still a mess. There's still gravel there, replacing where there were trees. This is not the right place for housing. The view has not changed. In fact, it will change it for the worse in front of those. Don't forget, these are maisonettes as well. So we've got first floor maisonettes overlooking the site, overlooking the garages. It's a wrong place where there have been allotments. There have been allotments historically. When the other half of the allotments were demolished, were taken out and built upon by the Acton Housing Association in the 90s. That was it was accepted that would remain open space, and it has other uses as open space. The fact that officers or the local plan people didn't let anybody know that they were taking away that status, well, that's unfortunate, and that's a shame. And that's something that should have been people should have been made aware of at the time. And even then, after that, and during that time, it still remained as community gardens. So yeah, I would look for support in this to refuse it. Previous times. Let me just add, previous times.
Sorry, Councillor Luki. My issue with this allotment is if there were allotments, people use the allotments. We are bringing this application twice, and there's no one in this room who comes forward and says that I use that allotment. If nobody used that allotments, so it's very hard to digest that people are losing the allotments and nobody is coming here to object this application. Or nobody even emailed us that I used that allotment.
Point of order, Chair. Are we still in the debate section, or was there a proposal for refusal?
It's not been seconded yet. Yes. So we're discussing. Yes. So that's my issue for not seconding that.
Okay. Well, your chair, maybe you may be chairing this and allow us to present. In terms of, let me finish if you like. In terms of deciding on this, this has been refused a couple of times by applications have been made in the past, and I forgive me, Sophie. The previous applications are mentioned there, P8, P9, P9, P10, P11. But they have been refused. They were refused by officers, even in delegated. But they have been refused or appeals upheld, appeals dismissed by the inspectorate on this. So that's why I'm sticking to it and hoping. These can be resurrected as growing spaces, particularly with other developments coming along, but not least because there are people that want allotments and want to cultivate allotments.
Councillor Farhan.
Thank you, Chair. To understand what Councillor Luki is saying, but if there's no proposal for refusal, I think it's a good application. I don't see no negative side to it. I just want to propose approval if that's possible.
First we have refusal, and any seconders? No. So now there is a approval on the table, seconded by Councillor Mohammed. Let's vote on that. For approval. Against approval? And absconded?
Yes, I'm still.
Thank you. Agenda item 6, development site adjacent to 1050 Great West Road. Thank you, Jackie.
Oh, you doing it? Right.
You want to start?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll do this one.
Thank you.
I'll whip through it relatively quickly, that Kay, and leave it to questions. But this is the Alpha Laval site next to the QI, north of Griffin Park Stadium, fronting onto the M4 flyover. I'm showing you a plan of it at the moment. It's a Google Earth image. I just want to give you an idea of what's been happening. So Alpha Laval moved out a long time ago, in the 90s or something like that. What happened is in 2009, there was a planning approval. The planning approval was to convert the existing Alpha Laval building into a hotel, which hasn't been implemented. A new hotel, which you can see in the foreground, that's a Premier Inn, and then is it 206 flats, which you can see surrounding the hotel and just to the south, or in this case, just to the left of the Alpha Laval building. There is a plot which is to the bottom left-hand corner next to the Premier Inn. There's an open plot of land that was approved to have office space on it. I can't remember how many offices, sorry, it was. They've endeavoured to market the site, construct the site. They haven't come up with a viable scheme for the delivery of the offices. So they have now come back to us for a proposal for a storage building, which is what you're looking at the moment. So this is an 11-storey storage building. It's a mixture, of storage and light industrial space, 28 cycle parking spaces, 6 car parking spaces, provides 6 to 7 jobs. There are some objections to the application. So even though there are speakers tonight, I will refer to them, but the applications come from the residential element of the scheme that has been constructed. So you can kind of see the situations arisen whereby there was an overall scheme, the offices didn't come forward, the residential did, and now residents have concerns about there being a building slightly larger in scale, but not dissimilar in scale and impact to what was approved as part of the original application. So that's not to say that we're discarding them. We've been through the process of checking impact on light outlook. We believe it's to be okay. And then I'll just focus on the elevations. So the elevations are what you're looking at the moment. So yeah, this is the self-storage building. If it's okay, I'll leave it at that, Chair, and I'll request questions if need be.
Thank you, Matthew. Any questions for Matthew? Councillor Luki.
Is this the previous iteration was a Hyundai advertising, or a Kia, or a car company were going to advertise with neon lights and similar? Is this the site there?
Yes. So what's happened is the existing Alpha Laval building, you can see on the right hand side, they've had huge hoardings, adverts on that site for years and years and years. And we've kind of been in a situation whereby we refuse the adverts, they appeal against the adverts, they get approval of the adverts, suggesting that they need this kind of hoarding adverts while they look to bring forward a viable scheme. It doesn't form part of this application. It's a clear and current issue, but not one to be considered tonight.
You say it's clear and current, so that won't get scratched. That could still appear here.
So sorry, the situation is that there are applications, and a recent application has been refused for retention of the hoarding. We're expecting an appeal to come forward and then for them to play out and suggest to us that it's not viable to have a scheme in there at the moment. Therefore, they'll keep the advert. So that's what's happening. It's not what the application in front of us is about tonight. So yes, you're quite right to raise the issue. It's in the forefront of our minds.
Any more questions? Thank you, Matthew. We have applicant Alan Evans. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Chair.
5 minutes to.
I'll keep it brief if that's
Thank you.
okay. Yeah, just to clarify right from the off. Good evening, councillors. The application solely relates to Plot C of the former master plan site. So there is no relationship whatsoever with the Alpha Laval building. Thank you. Yeah, the planning application before you this evening is recommended for approval. There's been substantial pre-application engagement with local residents, the Borough of Hounslow itself, the Design Review Panel, and also the Greater London Authority. The following details, I'll run through these fairly quickly, but I feel are relevant to highlight to you this evening. The site has been...
Was that your idea, or did officers ask you to do it?
It is our idea. Officers also suggested it, but we see the use of cargo bikes more and more. Even like deliveries like Pret, etc. Now use them. So yeah, we're very keen to use them.
Thank you very much. Any more questions? Thank you for your help.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors.
Let's discuss anything. Councillor Bowring.
I propose we accept a grant approval.
Councillor Mitchell, seconding. In favour of approval? Unanimous. Thank you. Agenda item 7. Land at UPS House, Forest Road, Feltham. Can we have Zara, please?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Zara.
Oh.
Sorry, we are having a few problems with the screens, but hopefully you can make it out. If I need to, I'll get up, I'll point it out, I'll try and enlarge it as best I can.
Good evening, everyone. The application is related to the land at UPS House, Forest Road. The proposal is for demolition of existing 3 buildings on the site and redevelopment of the site to provide 3 buildings to accommodate 6 industrial units class EG3, B2, B8. If you go up. No, up. Yeah. Sorry, one more. Yeah. Okay.
Can you just describe where exactly we are? You see those pictures so fast. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, if we go to previous. So here you can see the aerial view of the site. You can see, okay. Mm.
I'm trying to share a PDF at a particular point in time. So when I do the app window and do this PDF, it comes up with blank. Well, so you had it on yours earlier, didn't you? Or not?
Yeah, I had, but now I have my. If you want to start from the beginning, or we can go through the third slide?
I think you just need to establish where it was for some members.
Okay. So it is it is the aerial view of the site. Oh, it is the existing layout of the south. Yeah. Okay, shall we carry on? The proposal is for demolition of the existing 3 buildings on site and redevelopment of the site to provide 6 industrial units class EG3, B2, B8. The proposal is a sustainable development, achieving a total saving of 110% reduction in regulated carbon dioxide with biodiversity net gain of 202% and urban green factor of 70%. The application site has access from Burwell Lane and Forest Road. The site is to the west of Vector Park Industrial Estate and to the north of the MOD Feltham site. The area of the site is 1.28 hectare. The site includes 3 buildings of the Rexel, XTP and UPS house with a total floor area of 5,052 square meter, which would be increased by the new development to 6,637 square meter of the flexible employment floor space with potential capacity of 170 full-time job. These photos of UPS house and Rexel, and this photo shows the Rexel and XPD building. UPS house and XPD building have been vacant for some time, around 18 months. Rexel is in use as a storage with a lease ending beginning of 2024. Here is some photos showing the parking and the trees in the site. This photo shows the new modern industrial building at adjacent Vector Park Industrial Estate. Here are the proposed layouts showing the location of the proposed buildings and also safeguarded cycle pedestrian route and bus link from the Forest Road to MOD site. Here again, showing the details of the safeguarding route to the MOD site and the relation of the site with MOD Feltham site. Here is elevation of the building 1, which is unit 1, elevation of building 2, which would include units 2, 3, and 4, elevation of building 3, which includes unit 5 and 6. The overall height of the top of the parapet would be 12.8 meter, which is the same maximum height of UPS building at site, and the minimum height would be 10.8, which would be slightly higher than the other 2 buildings at the site. Here is some idea of the proposed material, the colors and the combination of the different material. On site, 21 trees are identified, all of them will be removed, and 50 new trees would be planted around the site and within the site. Taking all matters into account, approval is recommended in compliance with the NPPF 2023, London Plan 2021, and Hounslow Local Plan 2015, subject to necessary planning conditions and planning obligations.
Thank you. Thank you, Zara. Councillor Browning.
Hi there. I've got 2 questions, if I may. They are slightly linked. Firstly, it says in the report that there should be a maximum of 10 car parking spaces, and then that's improved. That's been moved up to 41. Just give us some bit more guidance on that.
So the London plan doesn't have like prescribed standards for industrial use, but it says as a starting point, you look at the, you assume it's B1 and work the level out from there. So if this was B1 office use, and because it's in an opportunity area, that means it's one space per every 600 square meters of floor space. So it does mean that if this was office use, we'd be looking at 10 parking spaces, but obviously it's not office use that's been proposed. So you look at then the kind of the specifics of the proposal and the use that's gone in there, and the figure that we arrived at with the applicant, we was based on the number of full-time employees coming to the site, and we assessed that against the mayor's transport strategy and the targets for the borough to try and get 75% of people coming by sustainable modes. Hence why we arrived at the parking numbers.
Okay, thank you. My second question is, in the last application, we saw some lovely spaces for cargo bikes. Given particularly the speculative nature of the scheme and that as you say, the end occupiers are not fully identified, did you consider recommending to the applicant putting in that massive space, putting in a couple of cargo bike spaces?
There is a condition asking for details of cycle parking, and yeah, that's something we could look at. Especially once the end users are known, it might be a requirement of them anyway to provide cargo bikes. So we'll make sure that's secured in the details.
Can we put that as a condition?
There is a condition asking for details of cycle parking anyway, but could we add in?
We can add into the existing condition we have.
Thank you.
Councillor Foot.
Yeah, you whipped through a bit quick, but your reference was made to MOD land, and I don't know quite what the reference was, because the MOD land that is adjacent to this is, of course, going to be given up by MOD, and it is part of development in Feltham. So I'm not quite sure what you were referring to when you mentioned MOD land.
The MOD land is to the south of this site, and it is required to have direct access for bus and cycle from the Forest Road. So for the future, because the MOD land has a plan to develop as a residential, so this connection is essential for the future residents of MOD land. So it is the guarded route from the Forest Road to the future MOD land on the site.
Councillor Sharma.
Hi, thank you, Chair. With regards to obviously the parking and the allocation of parking spaces, is this to be able to take the vehicles that like the UPS vehicles off of Forest Road and the adjacent roads, which are causing a huge amount of disruption to residents within that area, and also by Spring West Academy?
Is this the DPD vans as well from across the road? Yeah. So we put in waiting restrictions recently to at least protect the roundabouts a bit more. So that should have helped that issue. But obviously, there's still probably a lot of vans parking there. So it is something we're aware of, and we could put in more extensive restrictions subject to parking management. But that doesn't form part of this application. But that's something we can deal with outside of this.
Councillor Alan Mitchell.
Yeah, just a brief comment, Chair, as we look at the updated local plan and employment opportunities, being near the airport and everything. This is key to that, and I think it's a very good application, and it ticks all the boxes that we have as a local authority. Thank you. And I'd like to move acceptance. Oh, we haven't moved to the debate.
Yes. Just hold. Councillor Foot. Okay, so we have approval on the table. We have seconded.
Yeah, can I add my amendment of the 10% of cycle spaces being cargo bikes sufficient?
Okay, with the condition amendment seconded by Councillor Foot. And let's put on vote for approval. Unanimous. Thank you. Addendum reports, you would have seen all of this. To be noted. Any other business? Not. And next meeting is on from 7th of March. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Just thank you, Chair.
Thank you.